Weird. It says live streaming is not available right now.
Ooh.
Let's try
What's
this.
it going to show for like my image or my name? Is it going to show my...
It's just going to be my normal background.
Okay.
That's weird. Let me go to studio. Videos. Live. View in live control room. All right, can anybody actually hear me? Because it looks like I had a hard time trying to go live. So say in the chat if you can hear if I'm live or not. I'm going to type it in the chat too. All right, we got some confirmation in the chat that people can actually hear us. Good. Yeah, I clicked live and it said live streaming not available. That's always an ominous way to start your show. So, but I've got with me the well, why don't you introduce yourself, actually?
Yeah, so so my name is Levi Russell. I'm an economist and a professor, and I host the Catholic Economics podcast. It's currently a weekly podcast. I'm thinking about doing twice a week, but I haven't got there yet. And I do commentary on policy stuff sometimes, but I also have been talking a lot about usury, and I talk a lot about the interpretation of encyclicals in terms of policy for our day, and just mainly focused around Catholic social teaching and specifically on economic stuff. So if what I'm thinking about is going to a twice a week format where I have something on sort of the Catholic perspective on economics and policy, and then one show a week on just commentary on the economics news and that kind of stuff.
So today's topic is what can Catholics do? And I had somebody in the chat, a well-meaning person, say all we can do is pray the rosary. That's actually not true. Yesterday's papal encyclical is on Catholic action. It's written by Pope St. Pius X. Probably, I would say, the greatest pope of probably the last 125 years, if not longer. He was the first pope canonized in 500 years, and he gave us principles for organizing as Catholics. Because you might have noticed there are things going on right now that we can't really talk explicitly about that should require a Catholic response, and a good, well-measured one. At the very least, one where we go to our parishes and make sure nothing happens other than what's supposed to happen at our parish. So let's. I kind of want to talk a little bit about that, and as well as Catholic, basic ideas of what a Catholic should understand economics to be, and what our duties as economic actors are as Catholics. Because there are people who will happily tell us that our duty as Catholics is just to be good consumers, double O consumer. Go buy the thing and help the economy, and that's not really what we're called to do. So, and I don't think the two contact things are necessarily separate topics, but maybe they are. But I got somebody asking here in the chat how I'm doing living on the Muskogee Reservation. I'm not living on the Muskogee Reservation. On the map, I'm about 10 to 15 minutes away from that border that will never exist, because there is no way the federal government is going to let that happen. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry to burst people's bubble on this one. Both political parties have reasons to prevent that from ever happening. Because if you look at a map of the United States, and there's a lot of reservation territory that was never formally, through the power of the government, basically the crux of that legal argument in the Supreme Court. There's a lot of land like that out there, including what looks like practically the entire state of California. And if you think that the House Democrats are going to let that happen, that isn't going to happen. So I'm not too worried.
And I mean, it's really what it'll be. It'll just be legislation. I mean, because the court can say what they want, but if the legislative body just does, just comes up with some, bill, I mean, they can do whatever they want.
I think the biggest worry I have is right now about all of that is the fact that this court we have is probably the worst court we've had in, like, the Supreme Court for the last decade has probably been the worst in the. It's probably the worst court that I can think of, going back to maybe Dred Scott, like some just terrible decisions. And the thing that worries me is that we have a hard time, telling people, hey, you should come out and vote against the Moloch Party because of the courts. And then you have this as the example. It's terrible decisions these guys are making. Like half the decisions they made are just absolutely terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of one of Trump's picks is pretty bad, but I don't know. Probably should have known that going in.
Jojo asks if there's an update on the Hermit of Loretto. No, go watch the live site video on it. It's way better than anything I could do. I'm never going to make a video on that because they did the comprehensive video on it. Go watch it on LifeSite's channel. But yeah, let's talk about what are some Catholic principles do you think for organizing, Levi? Because when we think of organizing, we tend to think of hope and change and yes we can and that guy,
right?
And all of that and that that's not limited to that political ideology. It's in fact. Catholic action is a very noble thing that the church had pushed and kind of fell off after the council, sort of, even though there are places. For my dissertation, I cite some modern Catholic action stuff. It's all tied to Laudato Si, unfortunately, but it's still active as a concept, and it's part of our toolkit as Catholics, and we can do things about, at least things that threaten us.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the fundamental part of it, and this is really good, and part of that encyclical that you did, that you read recently, is that to me the fundamental thing is that you have to take your religion seriously from a political perspective. And so what I mean by that is, assuming that most of the people in this that are listening to this are sort of the I guess American conservative type persuasion to some degree or another. I think the problem that we have when we take that mindset is that we end up essentially being liberals, right? In the old sense of that term,
the classical liberal, right?
Right, and so what we end up doing is to say, oh well, we just want a level playing field for everyone, or we want to be inclusive, or we need to be pluralistic, or we need to let everybody have their piece or whatever. But the thing is. So to the degree that you take that position, right, you lose, right? So I'm not even going to say whether, I'm not the person to say that, in our current situation, should we be arguing for a level playing field? Okay, well, maybe. But the thing is like, it's just basic,
it depends what you mean by, and it also depends what you mean by level playing field too. Like
sure,
like I can get on board in our culture the classical liberal concept of everybody having the equal opportunity thing. Then again,
right.
if we lived in the culture where the classical liberals lived up to their own principles, you and I would, guys like us who want a more traditional social arrangements, would have a much harder time.
Well, yeah. So, I think like the way to put it, I think by analogy is just to say, like, if you're negotiating with something, right? Let's say you're trying to sell your car, right? So you're not going to go out there and list your car. You're going to put a sign on it at the bottom dollar you would accept, right? Because it's just not the way things work, right? You're going to put a number out there that you think would at least, spark people's interest, right? You're not going to charge $1 million for a 1995, Ford Crown Vic or something, but you're going to put a number on there that you think is going to get interest, but is going to serve as a starting point, right? Right. And so the thing is so what I'm saying is, like, we don't need, and this is how the left wins, right? The left wins in the culture war and in the politics by, claiming that they want everything, and then quote unquote settling for less, right?
But it still gets them towards everything anyway.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's just one more step down the road, right? And that's why people, you'll hear conservative types say like, oh, that's a slippery slope fallacy, and it's like, dude, look at the last 20 years. The slippery slope is just an accurate description of reality. It's not a fallacy.
This is why I always laugh when someone says, oh, it's a slippery slope fallacy. I'm like, can you name things in life that have been, in fact, a slippery slope? Because there are plenty of them, especially in this realm. But yeah, my guest is Levi Russell, host of the Catholic Economics Podcast. He's here on YouTube and on Anchor.fm. And because you're on Anchor, you're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and everything else too, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on all 10 of the major platforms. So, yeah.
Joji says he has to study economics for high school and hates it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I would say the problem there would be probably your high school, and hopefully not economics as such.
Right. When I was in high school, the closest to economics we had was personal finance, a class they saved until the last year, right? Instead of having you do it every year. Can you imagine how much more useful public education would be, and how harder it would be for us to say how much it sucks if you had like real life skills taught you every year instead of yeah, by the way, here's how you balance your checkbook, and by the way, you're 18 and it's probably too late, but you should stay away from credit cards. I mean, come on, like just absolute just trash.
Yeah.
Thomas Keller says, "Don't hate it. Economics is practical philosophy." It is, and your kind of economics do you do, Levi?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good point. I think that's something I should remind me to get to that later. So I mean, my background in economics. So I have a PhD in economics from a normal mainstream U.S. program, and so I understand that quite well. I spent 5 years at land grant institutions as an agricultural economist, and so my specialty is more in micro type of stuff. I'm not really like a GDP guy, but something that I realized, what sparked my interest in economics was kind of this Austrian school stuff. So I know something about that too, but I think what's driving me now is trying to understand kind of how economics operates, with real humans, right? And the problem with sort of standard economics and even the Austrian stuff, the problem with it, I think, is that it's so caught up in this physics envy thing where it wants to treat, supply and demand as laws of nature rather than just sort of observable components of the system we have. Right. I mean, is it true that, scarcity is a fundamental, reality? Sure. But, just because, we can draw lines on a page to say that, price controls lead to, shortages or surpluses or whatever, doesn't mean that, that policy is always a bad idea. So that's, I don't know what to call that. I mean, I would say, if there was a school of economics that was composed of like Heinrich Pesch and Peter Navarro, I think that would be where I would sit. But I'm really interested in reading more about the German historical school because, again, I think they did a very good job of at least avoiding one problem with the current economic mindset.
Looks like I've got a troublemaker in the chat here, so bye.
Uh-oh.
Bye, who?
Yeah. So it's one of these things where
it's I think the emphasis that we're talking about here is on people, right?
Right.
It's which people say, that some people are like, well, that sounds like left wing economics. I'm like, no, left wing economics is all very top down. I mean, when you have state planning of things, that's the last thing. What it does is in the name of the people are reduced to a cog in the machine. That's left-wing economics in a nutshell for you. That's how it's always been. There was a time not terribly long ago where the left actually got into localism and, like urban farming and all sorts of other kind of cool ideas, and I found that stuff interesting. And then they got, woke. So
well, yeah,
put an end to that.
But I think this is a really important point about this idea that economics is applied philosophy or some whatever the phrasing was. The point of economics or the point of Catholic economics, right? The point of properly informed economics is to bring about the common good, right? And so this is why we have to, when we're talking about action and what we're going to do, well, this is why we have to keep those principles at the center, right? And not have our sort of pre-commitments to certain policy positions to not to let those cloud things, right? Mm-hmm. And this was really me a couple of years ago. I was kind of maintaining myself as kind of like a Tom Woods kind of guy, where like I was all about libertarian economics and politics, but I was also trying to be a good Catholic. And it just, a couple of years ago, it just kind of hit me, and I was like, you can't do this anymore, right? This is just cognitive dissonance. And so what I've done is I've just said, okay, at that moment I said, okay, I can either be a good Catholic in good standing, or I can be a libertarian. And which one of those is more important? And so I've kind of decided that, if we're going to talk about left-wing economics, well, it's probably smarter to figure out what that means in terms of like fundamental perspectives and the principles of economics themselves, rather than looking at specific policies, right? Because you and I may agree with a lefty on a certain policy, but we're probably going to agree with them on that policy for a very different reason than they are.
Right. That's sort of,
and that's the big difference, and it's very important.
So we have somebody asking, Elvise asked, do you have any recommendations on how to learn to balance a checkbook? Their priest rushed into seminary is now having trouble doing it himself. And the Abbe, I guess it means the father, is recommending they go to college for, then that's just part one. But let's see.
So where to learn about how to balance a checkbook?
He's learning about going to college to learn about economics to be prepared for seminary, but you can't honestly be in the secular world anymore than you have to add. Okay, so basically, where can you find? He wants to know where you can learn basic economics, like real life, personal economics, from balancing a checkbook to like normal stuff, without diving into the secular world, because this is someone who sounds like they're on their way to seminary, and good on you for that. But they don't want to lose their vocation. And normally I wouldn't be too worried about people losing their vocation if they got a call to seminary. But every time I think that, I also am reminded of the time that I read on I think it was Bishop Barron, who was rightfully angry that a book as trashy as The God Delusion by Dawkins was causing seminarians to lose their faith. That book was one of the most terrible things ever written. I can't imagine.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing: is there's a big difference between economics and sort of the personal matters of a financial household, right? Those aren't really the same thing. So like economics is like sort of the philosophy and the statistical regularities of people who are trying to balance their checkbooks and have a business, right? So you don't need to learn any economics whatsoever to figure out how to, deal with parish finances and stuff like that. For that, you need to, go find some kind of basic, I would say two things. One, go check out Dave Ramsey's stuff, and he has a lot of free stuff. And there's a lot of free stuff on YouTube, I'm sure, just like for personal finance, the very basic household budgeting. But as far as like a parish thing, I would say just, learn some basic like enterprise business accounting, right? That's where you're going to need to be for understanding a parish. And again, you're going to be able to go on Coursera or something like that and take, a basic accounting course to understand debits and credits and balance sheets and stuff like that. That's what I would say a priest would need to know. Now, at the same time, when you're in seminary, so I have a friend, an old friend, who's a professor in a seminary, and I know, believe me, it's a she, but whatever. She was actually curious, and she's actually got her students listening to my podcast. And we had a long conversation about some controversial type policies from an economic perspective, and she was taking some notes from me and some stuff I had sent her to talk about them in her Catholic social teaching seminary class. So I think there's going to be some of that stuff in your seminary program as from an economic standpoint, right? Now that we're talking about the philosophy and stuff like that, you're going to get that stuff. But again, like basic parish finances, take a basic accounting course, and then you're just going to be learning the whatever enterprise software the parish uses when you get there. So like QuickBooks or something like that is what they're going to be using.
And I would, if you're going to take anything like that, I would do that stuff like through Udemy or Coursera or those kind of places, because they don't charge you much money for it. And you'll find that business accounting and personal finance stuff will be very useful when running a parish, because every parish is responsible for its own economic well-being, which is why so many of them got the that federal stimulus money that some people were upset about. And I'm like, I wasn't upset about it because I want parishes to exist. This isn't the same as, I don't know, what are those, Catholic charities taking grant money from the federal government to do things that violate the common good. It's not the same thing.
The media executed a very good psyop on us about that, because they basically made it sound like, the Catholic Church in Rome, got $1.4 billion. That's just like one big lump sum. But really all they did was they went and added up all of the money that was given to individual Catholic parishes around the country to pay, their janitorial staff or the teachers or whatever, right? So, look, I mean, this is fundamental to Catholic action, man. Like, if you want your parish to exist, then, you should not be complaining when the federal government's giving the money with no strings attached, right? So, like, yeah, of course, there can be problems when there are strings attached, sure, but in this case, there aren't any. So, this is a perfectly good thing. And put aside all the liberal, oh no, what about the government? Who cares? You got to have your parish.
Right. And Jojo, I had to approve your comment there about Catholic charities to call themselves the R word, because that is a word, that is a flag word that I couldn't put in a video. So, I ask you guys to be like, wise in the chat. But so let's talk about what Catholics can do right now, because we'll get back to the economics thing easily. But what I know that you are personally very concerned about what is going on with parishes. I mean, for those who don't know, in the United States, 2 Catholic parishes and a Protestant church both just mysteriously, and I am sure totally mysteriously, just poof, went into flames.
Yeah, just spontaneously.
Sort of like just Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
And
kind of looking back on that with different eyes now.
And we know, right, I mean, I was the guy who on YouTube made a video saying, the truth about it. And this is before I was monetized. I could never get away with making that video today. But it's that combined with the fact that there's a... you've got that. You've got that. We'll call it a monument to one of the great Catholic kings. Is the forces of chaos have decided they're going to descend tonight on it, and they're making it sound like they're going to go like full force. And there are brave Catholics out there who are going to pray the rosary in front of it. And the local authorities, I will say this to their credit, have put concrete barriers around the thing, so that will prevent some of the some mechanisms for bringing things, causing problems. But what can Catholics do? And this is why I put up that Catholic Action encyclical yesterday. So if you haven't listened to it after we're done, if you've got time, go and listen to it. And I'm not saying that for the clicks. Lately my encyclicals have mostly been for a reason, right? Sometimes I can't find one that's perfectly timed to what's going on. But yesterday's was about what's going on right now, even though it doesn't sound like it. It's St. Pius X's guide for Catholic action. And it's a papal encyclical, and he's talking about it in the context of Italy in 1905. But still, the principles can be brought up to date, and you can get a lot out of it. So, what do you think we can do?
Yeah, so I've made an effort recently to, to try to put something together. So here's the thing: is that you do have to. You do have to kind of lay the groundwork for this, I think. So the first thing that you should be doing is trying to establish yourself as some kind of a leader in your parish right now. This assumes you have the mettle for it, but you should be establishing some kind of leadership role in your parish. And one of the best ways for guys to do that is to join the Knights of Columbus. Now, trust me, I know there's a lot of criticism for the Knights. I get it. I'm not on board 100% with Supreme or anything like that, but they are extremely valuable groups for your parish, right? I mean, if you're not involved with them, there's probably a good chunk of the funding for your parish that goes through your Knights of Columbus Council, and you just don't know it.
So I've got somebody asking if I turn my microphone up. My microphone is at maximum volume.
Oh, maybe mine's too loud. Here, I'll turn my sensitivity down a bit. So, the thing is it's a very useful way for you to get involved with your parish and to get a group of people together. And, you know, I like, it's already in the chat. I hate the Knights, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. You're going to have a hard time organizing and doing anything useful to defend your parish in real life, right? You're going to be stuck, and the only thing you can do is pray the rosary. Now, that's a good thing to do, but the reality is, we're not quietists, right? We're not Quakers, we need to be there.
Yeah, we're not the types of people who are supposed to just let the bulldozer roll over us.
When
that comes,
you're not a doormat. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is, assess the situation with my parish. What looks vulnerable, what looks, potentially tempting to, the enemies of God, right? And tomorrow night, so I've talked with a few friends in the parish, and they're kind of on board with me. But I'm going to make this pitch to my Knights Council tomorrow night. And it's not going to be an officially Knights, sanctioned thing or any of that, right? And it's not going to be sanctioned by the parish. It's just going to be a group of men in the parish, and I'm going to tell them about this stuff, about these parishes getting burned, because if those were mosques or synagogues, they would be fine. Right, there would be all this national media attention, international, right? But since they're Catholic parishes, nobody says anything. So I'm going to tell them about that. I'm going to tell them about, the statue in St. Louis, Missouri, as well, and the one in California. I'm not sure what I can say and what I can't, but I'm trying here.
The only thing I think is the direct reference to the other religions. Of worship by name might be a little iffy, but otherwise,
all right.
But in general, that's fine. In general,
so here's the thing: is what you want to do is you want to make a pitch to people to say, look, we need to figure out how to, defend and monitor the parish, right? Because your parish is not set up to be monitored against some kind of invasion or whatever. So, what I'm going to try to do is organize people in my area to, very informally, just kind of deal with things, right? So the organization, again, all these criticisms of the Knights, blah, 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 fine. The point is, we're just a group of guys in the parish, and all we're doing is, driving by or checking on the place. And if things, and then if we get vandalism, okay, then we start having vigils, right? Then we start, praying around, our statues or whatever, right? We start kind of trying to have a presence there. And then, if we have to escalate the way the folks in Missouri have, we have to. But this whole thing about, saying, look in the chat. Don't be part of organizations. Organizations get infiltrated and co-opted easily. That is the most effeminate thing you could say, right? The point is, you have to be the one co-opting the organization. Don't be weak. Do it yourself. And so it's so frustrating to me, because it's like, look, don't whine about someone else co-opting an organization. Okay, you do it. Be strong.
That chat is pretty active right now.
Yeah.
And let's see here. Sylvia, I can't really read your comment on without getting in trouble here, but I'll say this much. In the city of Portland, they just released 59 people who would be charged with felony agent of chaos activity, we'll say, with no charges. That's my hometown, too. So I'm a little... I've got family there, so, Peter, I wouldn't be surprised if it was if this was all dress rehearsal, but actually, I think they're actually foolishly going for it all right now. But that's actually my suspicion. I might do something later on it. Computing Forever's got a really good video about all this stuff right now. I'd go check that out. And yes, he is a Catholic. I remember like a year ago mentioning Computing Forever on a live stream, and immediately the chat was like, people shouldn't listen to him. He's not a Catholic. Literally a week later, he did a video talking about how he had returned to his Catholic faith. I thought it was the funniest time.
Wow, that's really good news.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, he didn't mention his Catholic faith, but he returned to his faith, and then he was, interviewing Dr. Jones and some others, talking about going to Mass, and I kind of figured he was Irish. I was like, probably, but, let's see. Well, chat is, like I said, active. We need to re-co-opt our institutions. Yeah. I would definitely say that's true. We need to re-co-opt our institutions. The problem is the people who do the co-opting of institutions knew exactly what they were doing, and they put up firewalls. I have a video I have later in the week is by a very... I'm referencing writings from a figure who people are sharing a lot of his videos on right now. A guy in the 1980s who had been a Soviet person who came over and started warning everybody. You know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name his name because his name is absolutely a flag. But he wrote under a pen name, and I go over his the stuff he was talking about subversion, and he thought the funniest thing about it is he honestly thought that when he was doing his work for the Soviets that there would be people who would stop him anywhere in the world, and no one was doing anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what he was hoping when he got to the U.S. he'd find people, and there was virtually no one. And there's a reason for that. That's because in the 50s they tried, and the person who tried got destroyed for it.
Right. And I think that's the thing is part of it is that, we have to take the long view, right? We have to be careful about vanity because, just because, we may not be able to make, big leaps and big changes doesn't mean we can't lay the groundwork for someone in the future to make those changes for us.
Thomas, I did see your question about me doing a video about debunking Protestants. I'm not a theologian. That's not something I can really do. And the chances of me doing anything with Dr. Marshall anytime soon are very slim. He has a you must appear on camera policy, and I have a virulent anti-appear on camera because I'm not vain enough to appear on camera policy. Plus my studio, the room I record in, half of the room is black. From studio foam, the ceiling I have in here, my bookshelves, and the lighting in here is like light just disappears where I'm recording. So, I mean, the times I've appeared on camera for like my dissertation-related stuff, I looked sick. It was sickly looking. It was really bad. So, no, like I would have to spend $1,000 on camera and like lighting equipment just for that. And so, no, the chances of me doing something like that are slim. I've done very few theological videos by design, and the kinds I've done are things anybody could do, like papal infallibility, what it is and what it isn't, stuff that we should know anyway. That's the stuff I'm empowered to do. But like the Protestant stuff, I was never a Protestant, so I don't know. Like fighting Protestants right now, like if they are picking fights, I will happily step up and fight them back. But there's a lot of decent Protestants out there who are just as freaked out about everything going on as I am and you are. And I'd rather we have our debates with them after we've suppress the agents of chaos, as it were. And Condi, you are right, that is the person's name, but again, that person's name is a flag, so I can't say it. So there are certain names that you can't say on YouTube, and Tim Pool got in trouble for saying at least one person's name that was related to stuff in the headlines. It was just the fact.
Oh my goodness!
He called, yeah.
It's like you can't even have a conversation about it.
That's the idea.
Oh yeah, well, right there you go. Very Orwellian.
But there were people making references to saying that the cathedral was a dancing elder brothers related.
Oh,
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know about that, but maybe. Maybe, I don't know. I'm open to. I am finding myself open to almost any of the alternative theories of secretive plans that are out there these days, just because the official narrative about almost everything is obviously nonsense.
Right.
Let's see, but there are people in the chat suggesting people start their own sort of orders based off of, things that had existed in better times. Go look at St. Maximilian Kolbe's Militia Immaculata as an example. Now, it's not the same kind of thing, but I can't imagine most of these guys standing there and letting their parishes just, be done away with. I just can't. It houses the Eucharist. I mean, come on, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, there's no reason to, you can't turn your Knights of Columbus Council into a militia, but you can organize to the level that needs to be organized through the existing institutions.
Raymond Carly,
and so there's no reason to just let those institutions die or, be co-opted even worse by, your enemy or whatever.
Raymond, I know in the chat says my, Catholic Sopranos by the picture, judging from, I'm guessing means my picture. I'm sure you know that's Hilaire Belloc, who I had something by today. Something very light, because I couldn't find anything from him on Catholic organizing, so I did something on him about Catholic journalism. Condiacally, you can't even say the guy's name. Amazing. Yeah, it's true. You can't. Like, there's another person. I saw there was some, like, fringe commentary that some of you guys like, a channel out there. I won't say the name of the channel, but he was referring to this person. I won't say his first name, but his last name begins with the letter CIA. And he was calling him by his first name and then that, because if he said the full name, it was instant flag. Instant just suppression.
Oh, my gosh.
Right, yeah.
Unreal.
Isn't it weird how Shen Bapiro wrote a book on how to end America? Was it tongue-in-cheek, as he says? Sure. I mean, I don't like him at all, but I don't think he's the worst figure out there. I definitely view him as a gatekeeper for, anything to the right of center-left politics. Oh, Floyd in the chat is a member of the Maximilian Militia. Very cool. Very cool.
That's good.
Trump 2020 says, you mean Eric Jaguski? No, I don't mean Tried Cat Night. Do I think it's morally okay to use subterfuge against your enemies in order to gather intelligence, or is it too close to lying? Undercover operations to know what they're planning, for example. I'm certain that there are saints who engage in some of that kind of work, right? But I don't know. You're getting into, like, moral theology at that point. Subterfuge, and I guess it depends what you mean by subterfuge also, right?
Yeah.
Trump 2020.
I mean, this is
with a $2 super chat. Thank you, sir or ma'am.
I think this is an interesting point. So, you talk about subterfuge, or you talk about lying or whatever, right? All these types of things. And I think two important things to remember is that obviously we want to be within the bounds of our secular authority, within the bounds of the law.
Right.
But we also have to remember that our faith is the truth. So if you're going to be in service to the truth, then you have to be in service to the Catholic faith, right? I mean, right. To me that seems reasonable. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me that seems reasonable. Instead of this idea of just truth as pluralism, which is a contradiction anyway.
So Pipe asks, are there any Catholic prophecies on German National Social Workers Party, or whatever it was called? I'm not using the N word in the chat. Please don't use that word in the chat. Come on, guys. Again, be smart. They just purged vanilla conservatives from this platform, okay? Come on. No, there are not, as far as I know. But then again, other than, like, Our Lady of Fatima warning that a worse war was coming if certain things weren't done, that's the only one off the top of my head that I know of. But who knows? What do I know about the town of Tomar in Portugal, Knights Templar? I'm not an expert on the Knights Templar. Let's see. So, but you're basically trying to get people to essentially hang out at the parish, be properly prepared, and but otherwise be unobtrusive at night, right? And during the day when there's no masses going on, right? Like, there was one of those parishes was a fraternity parish in Florida that somebody drove their car through the front.
Yeah,
but I'm sure it was totally an accident.
Right. Well, I think I think the thing is you don't want to be the one that's escalating, right? You want to be prudent about the actions you're taking. The folks over in Missouri are, they're having some very specific problems, and they're having some very specific challenges, and that seems to be coming to a head later this evening. But I think we all have to assess the situations that we're in. I mean, everybody's parish is in a different location in the town, has a different type of accessibility. And I am not an expert on all this tactical stuff. I don't know anything about that stuff. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, what seems reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
Seems reasonable that, the guys in my little crew, or not that I'm some, organizer or whatever, but I mean, I guess I'm the one stepping out to put it together. So maybe I am, just change your route, drive past the parish a little bit more often during the day, or, stop by there on the way to work or on the way home.
And if somebody wants to, is a night owl and they just want to, and they're perfectly willing to, park
Sure.
their truck in the parking lot and
Yeah.
just play on their phone all night, and then they see somebody prowling around. Well, guess what? You have every right to call 911 to report a prowler.
Right. Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. Well, so there's a question in the chat. What's happening in Missouri today?
So there's the monument that we've been vaguely referring to the good saintly king that they've been trying to get rid of for weeks and weeks. And the agents of chaos have promised that they're going to pull it off tonight, and they're apparently going to show up in numbers. There are good Catholics who will be out there in front of it praying the rosary, and the local officials have, to their credit, put up some concrete barriers around it.
Yeah. So the thing is for the past few weeks,
I saw a recommendation in the chat for advocating for a perpetual adoration chapel in your parish. That way, someone has reason to be there at all times.
There you go.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
And also perpetual adoration in a chapel. If your parish has a perpetual adoration available, guess what happens? Vocations go up. The faith life of the parish goes up. Every indicator of a healthy parish goes up if you have a perpetual adoration chapel. There's no perpetual adoration chapel anywhere near me. I haven't been able to go to adoration in a long time because there isn't one near me. The closest I have are some really nice, wonderful monks who are pretty liberal, but they're pretty good. They're good guys, but they're pretty liberal. But they have their chapel doors open, and I can go sit in front of the tabernacle because they have their tabernacle off to the side, but it has a couple chairs in front of it. So I can go there and get the next best thing. But yeah, that's a good way to make sure there are people who have a reason to be there at all hours. But also, you could do more, like get more activities that are later at night. Men's groups at night, because why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that in general, you may not, and every situation is different. In general, you may not have to worry about having this persistent vigil for the security of the parish. But, and you're going to have a lot of nice old ladies going for perpetual adoration late at night too, which that's not really going to protect the parish.
It's not, but if they see something, they can
right,
get on their phone.
Yeah.
Thank you for the super chat, Scott. Elvise asks if I skipped some comments in the chat. I can't keep up with the comments in the chat from having a conversation so much. I can keep an eye on it, but that's about all I can really do and look at things as they come up. For 2020 again with the $2 super chat. Thank you again. Novoa says perpetual adoration is great, but you need to have a parish that actually cares enough to staff it. Your parish is one where the Blessed Sacrament is often left all alone, and it's heartbreaking. That's also true. Like you actually have to have like a healthy parish to where you're going to actually have people who will show up and be there for their allotted hour, or people who care enough who will be there for a second hour if they need to be. That's the one thing that I don't like about having moved from where I did is I no longer have the access to the, like I used to actually have access to one-on-one adoration. Great stuff. Can't get it anymore. Raymond asks what's always trouble. He always has trouble. He wants to know what's correct martyrdom or to fight back. Natural instinct is to fight. Christ went willingly. It's tough for him. Right, but there are saints we have saints who are soldiers. Saint Michael the Archangel is the patron saint of soldiers, right, for a reason. And the church has a long, vibrant history of just war doctrine. I might, next Sunday, I might do Fulton Sheen's essay on just war. The church says, we're not pacifists. It's always it's a well-meaning error people fall into, that to say that we're supposed to be pacifists. Some people are called to pacifism. More power to them, but that's not for everybody. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't martyr yourself unnecessarily, says Thomas Keller. That's also true. Be discerning in these things. Brian O'Connor, we're in the South. Our security team are the good guys. The guy that likes to dress in white hate us, so we need to be vigilant. We're the only church in the county. Wow.
My goodness.
Well, you only have one Catholic church in your county. That's just terrifying. Our parish has people everywhere living in the homes around it. Many of them are ex-law. People attacking the church would likely not make it far at all. At this stage of things. I'm hoping that this stuff gets taken care of soon, otherwise we're in trouble. Brian O'Connor, St. Martin of Tours, was a soldier. There you go. Yeah.
St. Flavin.
And Z says a Catholic Church are not Protestant Quakers. This is true also. There's a place to fight and there's a place to accept. And it takes a good faith life to know the difference. You know, one of my personal favorite saints is St. Maximilian Kolbe. The story of him going into the starvation bunker is incredible. I don't know that I'd be able to do it. You know?
Yeah, right.
I mean, that of all the ways to go to be martyred, that's like one of the most horrific that I can think of.
Yeah.
Driving around the church, bogus. Get inside and pray. I mean, there's that, but if you're outside, you can keep an eye on people approaching. The church that mysteriously caught on fire was had people in it when it happened.
Yeah.
Listen, all of you who want to do something, you'll send me. Tom's going to send me an email with info on how to proceed. Okay, well, I might put it on my blog because if it's the kind of stuff you're suggesting, my blog is probably the safest place for it. But I haven't put anything on my blog other than sources in a while. But
I think an important part of this is that there are probably, as a lot of people are saying here, you know, there are people in their parishes who have expertise in how to do things that are relevant for the types of defending or whatever that we're talking about. And you don't have to be that person you don't have to be knowledgeable about all that stuff to be the person to just get the ball rolling. You know, you can find the people in your parish who do know that stuff and just prod them. I mean, that's the thing is there's so many people who just aren't plugged in, right? They're living their normal daily lives and they're not paying attention to all the stuff that's happening in other states or whatever. And they just don't know. And so they don't know that it's a concern. And you know, so when you bring it to them as this is an important thing for us to do, this is an important thing for us to talk about and figure out in their head, you know, if their heart's in the right place with regard to your parish, they're going to say, hey, I know something about this. I can help this part of our effort.
Right. So and I've got somebody asking in the chat, you know, I put the story of St. Maurice and his legion up yesterday and how they offered their necks to the Romans when they wouldn't offer incense before going to war. Well, it wasn't just the incense either. They were also told to go and, you know, eliminate the innocent. It's a case-by-case basis. I mean, if the attitude I'm kind of sensing here is if people want us to all lay down, then what will happen is the church will be eliminated. Period. Full stop. There won't be a remnant because everybody will just be like, well, I guess this is the end. I'm going to go stand in front of the bulldozer and let the bulldozer run me over and my family, and that'll be that. That's the attitude I'm sensing. And I'm not suggesting that you go take up implements and go storm your local your local stonecutter building, or go and rush headlong into the black bloc. Don't do that either. That's not going to get you anything. And if you are going to go to to that saintly king's monument, remember, if there's going to be people who are detained, who's it going to be? You or the other side? Most likely. Bad news for you. It's most likely going to be you, because this is where the culture is right now.
Yeah. Definitely.
Do we have a tradition church, a new denomination? I don't know what you're talking about, Nito Wobbs, so you need to be speak a little more clearly on that, because I have no idea what you're talking about. If there are more devoted Catholic militias out there to defend the church, I don't know if there are or not. A lot of Catholics seem to. This weird pacifism among Catholics now is definitely ahistorical, and people just have this, don't want to, organize themselves. And a militia isn't necessarily, taking up implements, right? But I'll just leave it at that. Raymond says he loves the scene in Braveheart when the priest blesses the Scots before Stirling. Yeah. I also remember vaguely from that movie that I think the priest rushed into the battle himself too. Chocolate says he'd love to storm the local stone cutter building. I'd rather not set foot into it. The problem is, like, the gas station I go to in town is right next to one. So I have to drive past it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
How can we know where and when the next church or statue will be the thing? Is there a website or that they use? I'm hearing this stuff on social media. I'm catching a lot of this secondhand. I mean, if you want to go onto Reddit and try to join all these guys' subreddits where they're planning this stuff, go for it. I'm pretty sure they screen people. Yeah. Condi says the Catholic Roman legions accepted decimation of their ranks rather than lose their salvation. Yes, this is also true. Well, again, let's be smart. Always, like, our Lord gave us the best advice for all these kind of times, as he always does for everything, which is be smart as doves and wise as wolves, or whatever it was. Don't, or as wise as serpents, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Be wise. Don't be dumb. Let's just take a look here. Yep. YouTube says the Sunday stream is limited ads, or because of ad suitability, which means it's suppressed a little bit. But usually it gets unsuppressed afterwards. So, because I think people don't know how to talk in the chat. My family fled from Scotland to Poland in the middle of the James VI I's persecution of the faith. It preserved your family, their faith, and our local traditions for the next 400 years. Yes, in the days when there was a place you could go. There's nowhere you can go now.
Mm-hmm.
There's nowhere in the world that will be safe. Brian O'Connor says you should also set up motion sensors, internal cameras. Those cameras can be used to stream the Mass. Oh, yes. Forever Young says you saw a story about a priest who had a sword this weekend and got... Wow, he really? Is that for real? I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. Okay, Fiera, I'm muting you now because you're just being annoying. Let's see. Is Trump the new Constantine? No. James Orth, I usually do that. He says, make the sign of the cross when you pass the stonecutter's place and ask St. Joseph to block their deeds. Yeah. And those buildings always look creepy. Be prepared if you're not. Look into Krav Maga. Study your faith. I'm right now hobbled with a weak knee and probably a ruptured calf from it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Peter,
there's a reason why the supply of equipment at equipment stores is drying up very quickly. Right. So if you don't have any equipment for your own defense, you may want to get some equipment.
Yeah, Ace Hardware, and
yes,
those kind of places are hard to buy hammers at right now. It's pretty strange. Peter says, where the president leads, good people ought to follow. To a degree. There are some policies of his that just make me really angry. But I'm wondering how long it's going to take for these attacks against our parish to go to Europe. That was one instance in Holland, but apart from that, it's been strangely quiet. I mean, what's the mass attendance in Europe like, right?
Yeah.
The church is much stronger in the United States than it is in a lot of Europe, but that's just a sad fact.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron G says perhaps the weak pacifism coming from many is from the perceived powerlessness of the faithful over the beastly system that's arising. I mean, it could be, but that could also suggest a loss of hope too. Just this, we're running into the grinder of the global system. Thomas Keller says wise cameras are cheap and Wi-Fi decent option. Byron says good evening to us. He's not aware of anything being desecrated here in the UK, but fear that they will soon follow the diabolical lead. Your hours in the gym might finally be of use. Yeah, I haven't heard much about the UK. I think I've heard about one thing. I heard that the agents of chaos who wear black clothing and like to cause massive trouble, I'm not going to say their name because their name's probably a flag word too, but they're the ones in the headlines. They apparently went to there was a pro-child safety protest in the UK, and they came out and protested against it. Think about that one for a moment. and the implications of that. Like these people are there is, I do think that the saying that, our Lord lets people, drives people mad before he destroys them or whatever is true. Because our culture has gone off the rails completely. Besides the Knights of Columbus, are there any other dying Catholic orgs that you think have good bones to co-opt? Any organization like that to begin with?
So in some, I'll say this, in some parishes kind of strewn throughout the U.S., there is another organization called the Knights of St. John, and they're a little bit more secretive and tough to get into, but I think in a lot of cases they serve a lot of the same practical functions that the Knights do in terms of keeping your parish going, raising funds for things, putting on events. So there's, I know of at least that other one. But I would say
Bartholomew reminds us of "Thou shalt not kill." I believe the actual proper translation is "Thou shalt not commit murder." Difference.
There you go.
Right. Again, when you say that, you're dumping all over the Vendée and the Cristeros and the numerous other Catholic groups in history who are heroes of the faith, who gave their lives to resist Antichrist figures of their time. And people always forget about this. Do I think the legal decision...
There's no positive commandment to be a doormat either. So it's not like you can do some kind of exegesis to come to that conclusion.
Do I think the legal decision in relation to the Oklahoma state will have spiritual implications? I don't think the legal decision to the Oklahoma is going to stand. Because, as I said earlier, Teslamac, the state of California could be affected in the same way that Oklahoma has been, and there's no way they're going to let that happen. So don't be shocked if you see some massively bipartisan thing that takes care of this. El Pai says his Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest Parish was in a bad part of town, so it has double pane plexiglass and barbed wire around it, and a stolen legal car crushed through your front fence a few years back. Wow. Brev says, trying to get my Nike Jordan jogging hammers.
Oh my gosh.
You thought the Netherlands would be a hotbed of this stuff. Glad to hear it's better there. Yeah. It's hard to find lawn supplies at the garden supply store, especially compost. You're right. It's really difficult these days. I need to get back on that too. It's been difficult. There's an SSPX chapel in Chicago suburbs. It was once a stonecutter's place of worship. There you go. I'm hoping they did. Well, I'm certain that that Bishop Fillet or somebody came down and did an exorcism of the place. Brev has an Uncle Ted and says he might go live in the forest like his uncle did. Well, if that's a good option for you, I'm hoping that your uncle there has an extra hoodie for you. Patch, member of the channel, says that was in Dublin.
Oh man. Avenge me. Red Dawn, I love it. Oh, that movie is so fantastic.
Oh yeah, I know.
There's some good meme content from that movie.
The original Red Dawn is a fantastic movie. Go watch the remake if you want to see a parody. To give you an idea,
oh gosh,
in that parody, the Wolverines raid a subway that is still operating. There are people having lunch in occupied territory in a subway, and these are locals. And the Subway is still selling Subway sandwiches. It's the lamest product placement ever.
What?
Right. If you see the original movie, the population there is on the brink of starvation.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Let's see. Well, those people who like to dress in black should be called Gumby's enemies. Gumby's enemies? I don't get the reference other than, I know who Gumby is, but... I do think the Knights of Malta would be an interesting group to try to bring back. I mean, they still exist, and I think Cardinal Burke is still technically head of it, but that group has been so converged, it's not even funny. But it'd be another group to try to bring back. Another one of these groups that says, these were, saintly knights who, engaged in battle for the church. I mean, let's be real here. Again, the church is the one who came up with just war theory.
Yep.
Shark and alligator filled moats. I'm always a fan of shark and alligator filled moats for almost anything. I don't think my wife would do that in my yard though. The Holy Name
There's
Society.
probably some local codes against that.
Yeah, probably.
The gators might not last very long in your climate either.
No, and the sharks wouldn't either. I mean, I'd have to dig a pretty deep trench to put, a tiger shark or something.
Salt water.
Gumby's enemies are blockheads. Ah, okay.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. Tell that to the saints. Tell it to the Knights of Malta. Tell it to the all the great heroes of the faith.
Well,
yes,
the other alternative is just die by whatever sword,
and then let the faith become a footnote in history. Because I guarantee you, that's what these people want. I'm not saying go form, like the extremist groups in the mountains or whatever. I'm not saying that.
Yeah,
we're talking about going out and stopping them from knocking things over and from destroying your parishes. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And being prepared. Yeah.
And Catholic faith is not a faith of Quakers.
Yeah.
But
on the other hand, if that's all you can handle, then there's other things you can do that are valuable, but you should probably figure out how to handle something a little bit more than the bare minimum.
Right.
And no physical action.
Right. All out of African Polar Bear says, we have electric fencing, barbed wire, and a motorized gate for our parish, and we are looking for a gate guard during Mass. Then again, it is Africa.
Oh, wow.
Pretty sure he's not actually in Africa, but that's okay. My parish has a guard who has implements on him, and he is there with the full permission of the priest, and he's a Catholic too. And he stays there for all 3 masses on Sunday.
Wow.
Brandy Buck says gardening supplies, including seeds, are getting more and more hard to obtain. Nutritional insecurity may be coming soon. This is true, actually. Look at what's going on in Michigan was your bellwether for that. They were the first ones to do it. Ordering Walmarts to, not be able to sell seeds. Are you crazy? It's just ridiculous. A time is coming when men will go mad. When they see someone who is not mad, they will attack us, saying, "You are mad. You are not like us." Saint Anthony the Great. Yeah, I think we probably live in that time now. The original Red Dawn was made by Jack Abramoff. Met the guy before he went to the pokey. Seems bound for it then. Interesting. I didn't know Jack Abramoff was involved in that movie. I mean, that movie is absolutely Reagan era. Delightful propaganda from the Reagan era. But then again, when it comes to the more violent movies, I think the 80s was the last really. The 80s to the early 90s was the last good period for it before it all became silly. Elbai says we need to restore the traditional Jesuits and infiltrate an Eastern state. we do need to restore the Jesuits. Absolutely. Maybe we could declare a meme crusade. I think that's very 2016 thinking. It occurred to me today that's very fitting that we're seeing in the run up to what's coming in November the same kind of madness, but on a much larger scale that we saw after 2016. I think that's fitting. The USS Bonhomme Richard just had an explosion. Not sure what's going on just yet. Oh boy. Z, you mentioned the humble supplement and water filter salesman who likes to provide information related to warfare, and who's been kicked off every social media platform. And I had to approve your comment. Again, another name, right? No one in Mass this morning wore the satanic vestment face mask except the priest and the server during communion. Right. The parish priest in my parish will put one on just before he just gives communion. And he got a larger host, slightly larger host, but that's the only time he'll wear it. And I think that he does it at the order of the bishop. But the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City has now ordered all Mass goers to wear masks.
Yeah.
And I don't normally go to Mass in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, but usually when he does something, the Bishop of Tulsa does something too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, the Archbishop of Oklahoma City used to be the I believe he's the bishop of my hometown diocese.
Oh, okay.
Paul Coakley.
Coakley was either your bishop at one point,
yeah.
I know Coakley, I think, was the bishop of Tulsa before he became the Archbishop of Oklahoma City. He might have been an auxiliary bishop in your town. Although, is your diocese large enough to have the need for auxiliary bishops?
No. Maybe he was just a priest, but I'm pretty sure Coakley was the bishop of Wichita Diocese. So.
Man was made to serve money, or was man made to serve money, or money made to serve man? Money is a tool. The love of money is the root of all evil. I do love the secular version of money is the root of all evil. It's like, no, money is a tool. It's like anything else.
Yep.
They are their proper place.
Yeah. And I think this goes beyond that too, to other economic institutions. So if someone says, well, we should have a mandate for XYZ policy, then one of the primary criticisms of that is, well, you're going to mess up the market incentives, or that doesn't what is it? That disobeys the law of supply and demand. And it's like, look, man, I'm not trying to throw something up in the air and expect it not to come back down again. It's not that kind of law.
Right.
It's just the way. That's just the way we organize things.
So Elbai says he served today, and the Abbe's one rule was that you not wear a face mask while in the sanctuary. Good. That's good.
That's nice. Rebecca Phillips.
Money is not the root of all evil. Money brings out the true person. You do get to learn a lot about a person when they all of a sudden have like an inordinate amount of resources at their disposal.
Yeah, that's true.
Rebecca Phillips asks who you are. Levi, why don't you introduce yourself again? Because
sure,
we've got a lot more people than we had at the beginning of this.
Yeah. Yeah, so my name is Levi Russell. I'm an economist and professor. I have a show that's primarily on podcasts, but I also have a YouTube channel, and I can put I'll put a comment in the chat here in a second. I cover...
The show's called the Catholic Economics Podcast.
Right, Catholic Economics Podcast, and I covered mainly Catholic social teaching sort of meets policy kind of discussion. So how can we implement this? Does this make sense in our time? What does this aspect of CST, Catholic social teaching, mean? And sometimes I do commentary on current events, current economic stuff. I'm thinking of doing a twice a week thing where I do one on CST and policy and stuff like that, and one episode a week on news commentary and stuff like that for the economic news. I'll put a link in the chat here for my channel.
Thomas says, "What's your opinion of Louis O'Kelso and his employee stock ownership program as far as Catholic economics?"
Employee owned. So Louis O'Kelso.
I'm guessing you're not familiar with Louis O'Kelso.
I'm really not.
But employee ownership is definitely right. Is like explicitly Catholic.
Yeah.
Catholic social teaching.
I mean, here's the thing. Here's why I think. Here's why I think we talk about Mondragon and co-ops so much, is because things like employee ownership are good, and so. How do you do that if your organization is not a cooperative, right? If your organization is not a cooperative and it's not built like a cooperative, then how do you go about sharing the profits of the organization with those employees? And stock ownership, I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, it depends on what you do with it specifically. If you're replacing some of the cash compensation such that you're not paying a just wage, I think that's a big problem. I think there's possibly because we get into things like 401k matching and stuff, and that is an important consideration. Should the employee have some kind of match on their 401k investment that allows them to diversify their stocks rather than just invest in that one company? Sure, but I really like profit sharing and bonus programs and stuff because as Chesterton and Belloc taught us, it is important for each person to have some kind of capital ownership, not just be a laborer, but to have a capital capital stake, and that's one way to simulate that in the flawed world we live in.
And there are going to be people who say, well, that's socialism. No, it's not. Socialism is when the state does things in the name of the people and then keeps everything for themselves.
Yeah,
that's what socialism is.
Yeah, we have to get rid of this idea that anytime we're concerned about laborers or the working class or whatever.
Or the excesses of capitalism.
Yeah.
That we're talking about socialism, which we're not. Like, socialism is an evil system. Joe asks you, there are these softball questions. Well, here's one that's like a t-ball question for you. What do you think of usury?
Yeah, I think usury is very clearly condemned by the church and it should be illegal. And the definition of usury is taking of interest on a loan. Read the catechism. It's a very broad definition.
And this is something that, like, I have an article that I would want to get permission before I record it, because it's written more contemporaneously by whoever runs I think Catholic.org or Catholicism.org. I think it's Brother Andre Marie's website. But it's an essay over the entire history of usury. The church condemned usury in an infallible council in like 346 AD or something. Some ancient time like that, where they defined usury then, and then it was reiterated with Vix Prevenit, which in 17 something, and then like 80 years later, that encyclical was reaffirmed as the supreme law of the church on the issue.
Yeah,
like this is something
I can't put a link to my channel in the chat, Anthony. Just
weird.
So you know.
That's odd. Okay, let me go.
Yeah,
let me go fix.
I tried to do it and it blocked it. Yeah.
Oh, that's probably it's probably they probably think it'd be spam.
Yeah. So Jeep Guy asks, what is Levi's opinion about the economic collapse that is predicted for this fall? Will it happen, or is it fear-mongering? Oh, man. So the first disclaimer I want to give is that I'm not a macro economist. I don't study the vicissitudes of GDP. So I'm not super qualified on that. But I would say that what I think is happening right now, is that the retail sector is bouncing back pretty well, but I think the affliction, as Anthony calls it, and all these other, I think maybe we were due for a recession, whatever that means to be due for a recession, but I think there's some weakness showing up in the more production and fundamental sectors of the economy that are showing some significant weakness. And the part of this is probably short-term effects from the curtailing trade with China. We get a lot of cheap, toys and crap from China, but we also get a lot of cheap inputs into other processes from China. Mm-hmm. And so to the extent that the trade policy changes have impacted those firms, I think there's a real challenge there. I mean, economic collapse. I mean, look. I mean, these are words that you get from CNBC. I don't know what that means. I'm an economist. I don't know what economic collapse means. I know what a recession is. A recession is 3 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, but I don't know what a collapse is. I would guess a collapse would mean Great Depression or worse. Right. And okay. So in that case,
we were briefly there at the beginning of the affliction, right? When unemployment went up to 20%, 25%, but it's already gone down significantly. Like every month, it's millions of jobs being produced right now.
Yeah. There's a lot of problems with measurement and all of that. So I think that might be part of the problem.
So Mary in the chat asks if we have any ideas about the Great Reset that's been circulating. What do you mean by the Great Reset? Like, are you talking they're just gonna, like, I've heard like some people talk about this in terms of just wiping out all federal debt. I don't know how possible that is. I'd love to see it, mostly because I just like to see the banksters just be, cry.
Yeah.
Can Mass be opened again at full capacity and be held outside? Ask everyone to bring their own lawn chairs and sit 6 feet apart. You'd have to ask your bishop, Sylvia.
Yeah.
That's your bishop's call.
Yeah.
Let's see. Imitation
of Christ. We got a question.
We got people telling us to read The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Everyone should have that book on their shelf or know somebody who does so they can read it. It's a good book. It's one 10 out of 10 recommendation there.
There's a question from CF Huling. I don't know how to pronounce it. But
member of the channel. What does Levi think of Baron Metal to give a good understanding of Father Pesch's Layer Book Primer?
So I've never read Barren Metal.
Baron. Oh, you mean Baron Metal, the book by Dr. Jones.
Yeah.
That is a question I would suggest you take to our mutual friend, the ever spicy Trad Patrick, who recommends people who loves Father Pesh unlike anybody I've ever met. But I do think Baron Metal's on my personal list of books to read. I just need to.
I mean,
I have a lot of books. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Somebody sent me a copy of Consecration to Joseph this week from Father Calloway. Thank you for that. And then, or that was last week. And then this past week, someone sent me Archbishop Lefebvre's The Great Heresies. I mentioned it in a stream last week, so thank you for that. That book's a little large for me to record for the channel. And normally I wouldn't do newer books with active copyrights, but I know the SSPX does not care. And they're the ones who own the copyrights to those books. So I know for a fact that they don't care.
So I want to say something about Pesh real quick. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. EMJ is fine. I like what I've heard from EMJ as far as economic stuff goes. I haven't read Barren Metal, but if you want to read something from Pesh, you can read Ethics in the National Economy, and you can buy that on Angelus Press's website. So if you go to Amazon, it's $56 or something. But Angelus Press is selling the version of the book published by IHS Press. And it's a very good short book. It's very readable. It uses a lot of Catholic language, and so it's someone who listens to Anthony's channel a lot is going to get a lot out of it, because you're going to understand, what Father Pesh is talking about, because he's going to refer to catechism-y type of words a lot, and I think it's very useful stuff. So I don't have a problem with you reading whoever you want to read, but if you want to read Pesh, just read Pesh. I mean, there's this one book in English. And I'm also, another thing, Anthony, I guess we could push is the Institute.
Right. We've never formally mentioned this publicly before. I've made some vague references to having something else in the works. But we are, starting essentially a Catholic social teaching organization to defend, preserve, and promote Catholic social teaching. And it will give us some mechanisms, including having a backup home for this podcast and his podcast, and hopefully other people in the future and other things. We want to talk about that, Levi?
Yeah, so if you go to leoinstitute.org, the Leonine Institute for Catholic Social Teaching, obviously built around the thought of Leo XIII and his successors. What we're trying to do is to put out information that is useful for the public and useful for politicians as well. And one of the projects that we've been working on that are up there are relevant to sort of U.S. electoral politics. And currently, I'm working on a paper on usury, where we're going to try to correct some of the common errors that we're seeing out there with respect to usury and that sort of thing. So we're trying to give you a one-stop shop for understanding usury in the modern world. So I think that's something that we're really working on, and myself and one of the co-authors on that paper, we've kind of discovered that there were some economists that kind of followed in the tradition of Father Pesh, and so we're going to try to bring to light some of their insights as well here over the next few months.
We also may get into some publishing of things and trying to bring back some very controversial Catholic social teaching work done outside of the papacy, because by people who have been maligned through history, as well as some other things. But
sure.
We have our election document. If you go and read it, it is not an endorsement of things. We debated whether or not to do an endorsement of stuff, of like anybody running for president. And you'll see some people will be like, all we did was say, who lines up the most with Catholic social teaching?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the incumbent. I'm sorry to break the news to you. It's some third-party person. Mm-hmm. It's not. We're not endorsing that person, though. And we may actually write, like, I don't remember, did we put up the admonition from the Vatican saying that if in an election you have the duty to vote to stop essentially the Moloch candidates? running in your country, because if we didn't, we should have it. We need to do something, because all we did was say that if you're wanting to vote based purely on the Catholic morality and Catholic social teaching, this is your candidate. However,
no, it's not Kanye though.
No. Yeah. No, it's not Kanye. We did this document like 6 months ago now or something. Thank you, Kimberly Young, for the super chat. It is appreciated. Somebody says that, let me see, Ian J. Brandy. Yes. What do we think of Traddist Day? I don't know who Traddist Day is. A free market isn't free if it's manipulated. Well, okay. I don't know what that even means, but free. Like I'm not one for idolizing the market. A market is a tool meant to serve human beings, not us to serve the market. Question about usury. What if the interest rate's equivalent to the inflation rate? Because it seems moral if I gave money to someone in a tough place and he asked for the amount plus inflation when you pay him back, I suppose. I think that's an honest question, because charging interest on loan, right? But
I think the issue is that is that interest, or are you just trying to make sure you're paying back in the same dollars, right?
Right.
So
that's legitimate, because you start getting into problems with long-term loans and things. Brian O'Connor says you can't have a completely free market. Adam Smith didn't argue that in The Wealth of Nations. He understood there needed to be agreed upon rules of the game, if you will. Levi, something maybe we should consider doing, even though it's not a book we would agree with, but would be a condensed version of The Wealth of Nations with an intro saying, look, this is not Catholic teaching at all, but if you want to know what Adam Smith says, this is something to read, because I read Wealth of Nations cover to cover. It is one of the most dreadful things you will ever read. If you want to read about candles and corn and weights and measures, read Wealth of Nations.
Yeah.
It's what most of the book is. It's sort of like I wrote my master's thesis on Thomas Jefferson and his political philosophy, and people keep talking about the notes on Virginia as being this amazing book. There's like 2 pages in the notes on Virginia that are political theory and have anything to do with politics. The rest is how wonderful Virginia is and how geographically amazing it is.
Well, so here's one response to I'm reading that as a defense of Adam Smith, and maybe it's not, but I think the issue is that I think you're right. I think Adam Smith did take a lot of things for granted that we like, right? Stable society, the family is the center of the center is the family is the fundamental unit of society, and all that sort of thing. True. But the problem that he didn't see is that his underlying philosophy, right, the liberal philosophy, is only strong in the sense that it is basically a cancer or bleach or something. It can only degrade the cultural institutions it's sitting on. It can't build anything. And so, yes, it's true that back in Adam Smith's day, he was writing for market institutions that took for granted a lot of the cultural things that he liked. But now, when all those cultural things, or most of them, are gone, then the market becomes even more predatory, right? The market is like Anthony was saying, just a tool. But the point is, whose hands is that tool in, right? The people who are wielding that tool now are, morally speaking, much worse than they were back in Adam Smith's day.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think that's an important... So our RWHZ says, Levi, I think the Distributist channel should cooperate with you in the subject of the Catholic social teaching.
Well, here's my one problem with that. I like the Distributist. I'd love to get him on the show, actually. If you're listening, man, reach out to me. But I cringed visibly when he described distributism as Catholic socialism. He did it in an offhanded way, but it made me cringe, because literally it's not.
Well, so I will say that I like the Distributist. I've been on his. He invited me, or his group invited me, kind of when he took his first break. He invited me to come on, or his group invited me to come on and give a talk on Catholic economics, and it was very dry and lecture-y and boring or whatever. But I do appreciate that they are looking for people who want to talk about this stuff. And look, Distribute Dave will tell you he's not an economist. He's not a political philosopher, right? He has a profession that's separate. So, to the extent that he might make a mistake here and there on those things, I think is perhaps likely, but also forgivable to an extent. So.
Let's see. Do I see a situation where we're moving towards Libra cryptocurrency? I hope not. Healing says he doesn't know if he'd be welcome at Trad Patrick. He says a lot of stuff makes sense, but he's not an Anglo. I'm thinking you mean Anglo. Well, Trad Patrick's not an Anglo either. In fact, if you call him that, he'd probably get mad.
Yeah. Oh, he certainly would. No, I actually had Trad Patrick on my show a couple of weeks ago. And the episode is called On the Grifters, because I wanted to understand what the grifters are and get a more academic understanding of what we mean by the grifter. So did a short interview on that.
Peter says Louis, even the great French Catholic, wrote a lot about usury through his French Canadian newspaper called Michael Fighting. Capitalism only works in a moral society under the same understanding. Again, it depends what you mean by capitalism. Like, one of my favorite Chesterton quotes is that the problem with capitalism is that there's not enough capitalists. His idea was you make everybody into the capitalist. You make everybody a property owner in a real sense. Like, most people talk about their house as if they own the house. The bank owns your house, probably. If you're paying them, they own the house. But also, if the state can kick you out for not paying taxes, they own the house. You don't. It's one of those really disturbing things about our culture that most people don't realize. And I know I almost come off sounding like an ANCAP when I say that stuff, but I don't think the state should be able to kick you out of your home if you don't pay their taxes on them. Then again, at the same time, I agree with Trad Patrick when he talks about how overinflated the value of homes is.
Rebecca Phillips says, how would you even implement a Catholic-based economic system in a vastly secular industry that uses property laws based formally from Catholic law? Just curious, because it's very convoluted. So, I mean, here's the thing: is I think we can find alliances with people who don't agree with us on the fundamentals, even if they agree with us on a policy, right? So back in, I think, 2004, Elizabeth Warren, of all people, wrote a book called The Two Income Trap, where she talked about the fact that this the preponderance of families with two incomes creates a lot of problems, and she had a specific angle on it that was relevant for her specific little part of academia that she's in, which was about bankruptcies and stuff. But the point is that, okay, you want to, and I have an op-ed, I sent it off to a national newspaper and they ignored it, so I'm going to try to send it somewhere else. But I have an op-ed on family wage. And so, we can work with the people who, fundamentally disagree with us and who are secularists and stuff. And we can work with them to try to implement policies that are going to push us in the right direction. And they don't necessarily have to agree with us on the fundamentals, but I mean, it would be good if they did, right? We want to, convert the world, but just from a practical policy perspective, we can push, I think, for these better policy, even with people who are, not on the same page.
So Yavo says if you need a consultant from the manufacturing side, let him know. He's got an automation controls engineer. He's an automation and controls engineer. Okay. Wow. And Thomas, we're not talking. We don't endorse third parties. Don't get confused. We're not doing that. We just made a list. There are people who want to know who to vote for based purely on the formal teachings of the church, and the church doesn't give you that information itself. So we did that hard work for ourselves, and we did that back months and months ago when we were predicting a 450 electoral vote way for the incumbent. Now
right.
it's hard to even picture what's going on.
But here's the thing too, though. I think that document is also a good way to give people sort of a primer on Catholic social teaching and what our view of implementing Catholic social teaching in those policy areas looks like. So if you're not going to read it for our advice on who to vote for, that's fine. But you can also read it for that angle, I think.
Elbai says he's glad Patrick didn't become a priest, because imagine what a cleric with those views running around would be like. Well, there actually are a fair number of priests with his views. Actually, you'd be surprised. The left is often right about what is wrong, but rarely right about how to fix it. It would be good not to overcorrect and people fall through the cracks into greater poverty. Well, I mean, I don't know. They're good at pointing out problems, but they even diagnose the problem incorrectly. like their attitude is that you can end poverty. I have it on good authority that the poor we will always have with us. Like,
yeah, but I think the point that she's trying to make is that if we ally with them on certain policy goals, and then those policies end up with unintended negative consequences we weren't anticipating, right?
Right.
That's where we fall through the cracks into greater poverty. I mean, yeah, okay, but I mean, I think the thing is I think a lot of the doomsaying from the free market crowd about negative unintended consequences of policy is more an article of faith than it is some kind of provable empirical fact.
Elvis, in response to what I said about their comment, do these priests have public media presences? You'd like to hear what they say. No. In fact, most traditionalist priests are prohibited by their fraternal societies from being on social media at all. And the ones who are either softly disobeying or, for one reason or another, got a pass for it. You'll sometimes see these rather based priests, though, on Twitter. They're very quiet about it, though, but you recognize them when you see them because they're not sitting there taking pictures of their G.I. Joe collection and simping for the I don't know what is the
for
random
the girl.
Yeah, just randomly gross stuff. Healing with a super chat. We'll have to go back and finish the last cyclical. Definitely do so. It's and thank you for the super chat. Do so because it's the church gave us the tools to address any of the social problems we have.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm going to probably have a video later in the week about one of the better priests out, or one of the better bishops telling us that the things going on are our concern, echoing Bishop Barron, actually. I think he kind of comes with he doesn't come off as flippant about it. And so it's going to be, I have a policy of putting up the better bishops. And when I say better, I mean there's a range of them from hermeneutic continuity, Vatican II is fine, it's just implemented badly, to full-on Vigano/SSPX position, and the range in between, right? And he's more on the hermeneutic of continuity side of things, and he'll be later in the week, probably, unless some major news happens. But, it is sort of the establishment's position that, everything going on is up to the laity. So that encyclical gives you things to do. But I will say something nice about Bishop Barron now. This is the second time in this stream. I should watch it. I think surpassing my quota here for that. But he was at the statue. He was at the statue of Saint Junipero Serra praying the Rosary publicly with the people there. I'll give him credit for that. That's dangerous, especially since he's a public figure.
Sure. Rebecca Phillips says, clarifying. I think there are policymakers that would take advantage of the social teaching. It would take constant vigilance against predatory practices of political gains. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
They already do that. Unfortunately, so you see in the church, you have these bishops going back to the 60s, and Dr. Jones has a lot of talks on this. But I can't remember the name of the priest, but he was associated with Notre Dame, I think. He basically invented the precursor to the seamless garment and made it so that we saw the Moloch issue on the same level as unemployment. And that's how you got guys like Biden and these other guys who are just reprehensible when it comes to the moral teachings of the church. And so we already have that problem. And part of the reason we have that problem is because we have bishops who don't want to do their job. Their job is to publicly condemn these people. And I don't mean condemn them like you're going to hell, but say, no, you're cut off from the sacraments until you publicly repent. That is their job. Yeah. If I came out here on my stream and started spouting heresy, I should expect to get a call or a letter from the bishop cutting me off until I publicly recant and then confess to him directly. I should expect that, but that'll never happen.
Yeah. I think it's certainly a problem we already have, and I think it's smart to be cognizant of it. So yeah, I agree with that.
Elbai says my Twitter post led down the rabbit hole of non-Christian practices involving. Oh yeah, I'm thinking you're talking about, if you're talking about that sort of meme that I posted of the celebrities. That's all I can say, because that's way too spicy for YouTube.
Thomas Keller. That's pretty funny. I don't want to read it, but it's funny.
Baron Metal, the time he showed up for the faith.
That's pretty good.
I do believe we need more actual real Catholics in our government from local to top. This requires a massive conversion. It does, and it also requires Catholics who are willing to carry that cross of working in those institutions. I thought that would be me, but then I couldn't get interviews. Or when I got interviews, I figured out pretty quickly that I was the sort of fill the quota interview. It's like if you really want to get like red to black pilled, go and be trained to work in the public sector like I have, and then go do your due diligence to go get jobs in those places, get interviews, get rejected for them, and then a few weeks later go check their website to see who got the job.
Yeah.
It'll make you mad.
Freeze Frame says this will take 100 years. Yeah, that's true. That's why you got to be okay just being someone who lays the groundwork or who just passes the bucket from one hand to the other. You got to be humble.
Like you maybe you'll be, you get a job in the parks department of a city somewhere, and people laugh at those departments, but you have no idea what kind of policies those things do. Like they're talking about land management in the major cities. They're the ones pushing sustainable development in their urban areas, right? I mean, there's a lot of power in those organizations, and maybe you'll get a job there and you're planning events and things, and you do a good job and you get the promotions and things, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a position to be involved in the hiring of people. That's power. That's power to transform an organization. Google account. You mailed me a link to Father Chris Solar's homily from today's Mass. He mentioned the End Times, 3 Days of Darkness book of warning. The illumination was great and long. Okay, I'll have a look at it when I can. After the stream, I'm going to spend the rest of my Sunday with my wife and my kid. Peter says the Vatican used to condemn usury and not anymore. Right, and when they tried to change the definition of usury, and it's one of those things that people like me jump on when I go, wait a second, this was the definition for 1,700 years, 1,800 years, and then all of a sudden they changed it. And they never changed it with a definition either. They just said usury is now unreasonable interest, and they never told you what that was. I mean, yeah. Elpi says the W thing, I'm not saying their name now, and funny chemical thing is what you're referring to. Okay, yeah, I figure that's what he must be. Rob from Catholic Charities in Spokane was teeth-cracking cringe. That man is like the definition of, like, honestly, I would take that clip, and if I was like a Catholic version of our humble supplement salesman and I was trying to sell testosterone boosters, I would use that clip and say, don't become this guy, buy my product.
Yeah. Unprecedented levels of soy.
Right, yeah. I was looking for a book on Catherine Emmerich. No, I was looking for a book on Blessed Anna Taiji. She's and I got like probably 30 emails from people with links to websites and book names. So, but if you find a good book on that Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, go ahead and send it to me because I found that I'm running out of We Were Warned topics. So, like, major figures I haven't covered yet. I mean, I may have to start like mining through Tradcat Knight's website because he's got like all these obscure mystics of the church that I've never heard of. So I may have to start doing that, unfortunately. Yavo says, look at your social life as if you were a parent. Yes.
What is, let me see here. Socialism / communism is against the 10th commandment, redistribution. Yeah, well, redistribution isn't communism and redistribution isn't socialism. Redistribution is just the outcome of a policy. So, I mean, communism is an atheistic, collectivist, evil philosophy, but just because they claim to be the only people redistributing doesn't mean they are, and it doesn't mean that redistribution is a bad thing. So I disagree.
Thomas Keller says I should not become the humble water filter merchant. I don't have plans to.
Oh man, I need a water filter. I thought you were going to sell me one.
Yeah. So what's a Catholic to do? Pay them, meaning your debts, or jubilee yourselves every 7 years? Well, I wish we had a jubilee system, honestly. Like, I think we could use it. Like, America is a country, and the Western in general, but America especially is a country built on debt. Mm-hmm. Imagine what we could do if people could be freed from those payments that they can never get out from under.
Yeah.
Have I read Catholic Republic? I have a copy of it. I find the hypothesis of it humorous and ahistorical, to put it mildly. That's all I'll say on that, too. Did I get my ideas together for the fundraiser? You mentioned a couple streams ago. You had mentioned books. Oh yeah, Levi had mentioned that I wanted to do that someday with Trad Patrick. I would probably be on a stream of his or something where we'll do a fundraiser for, I don't know, buy a Saturno or a cassock for a seminarian or something, right?
Oh yeah,
And
that's a good idea.
And we'll get some of the people that we all know who don't like, the grifter thing to serve as a nice check to make sure that the money goes where it's supposed to go. And I haven't really thought too much about it. It's an idea I'm still stewing with. I need to figure out some books to get for it, but and how to make it work too, because I've never done something like that. Because all of a sudden I don't want to find that because my plan would be to match up to a certain dollar amount out of my own money that I've made, doing this for a living.
Sure.
For this, right? Put my money where my mouth is. But I don't want to find myself doing that and then I'm going to buy $500 worth of books from good Catholic publishers. That would suck.
yeah, definitely.
Did I get my Brown and Connor communists? Don't redistribute anything. They're strict humanistic materialists. They do the redistribution thing when they're not in power. That's what they advocate for. And when they get some power, they do the redistribution thing. But the whole point of it is to get people used to government as daddy or mommy. Yeah. What about a water filter that auto-consecrates holy water similar to Gillian Smith's pre-blessed food? That sounds like an amazingly terrible idea, but the kind of thing you probably would find on some terrible website out there run by somebody who claims that they've made themselves pope because they got a vision from a angel that they made up on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Father Chris A. Lars homily mentioned a saint stated you won't survive the 3 days of darkness, chastise it unless you are confirmed. Well, there's that, and then there's also Google count that it's also anybody who God wants to survive for conversion purposes. A lot of people I don't like the 3 days of darkness thing is an interesting topic only because it makes it sound like that God's going to clean house. That's why I tried Cat Knight. A lot of people don't like him, but he's like, look, if this happens in your lifetime, most people in the world aren't going to be around afterwards. And if he says he means most.
Yeah.
So, just work on being in a state of grace and do your due diligence. How does judgment proof work on money owed on a loan? I don't know. What is judgment proof on a loan? Why does nobody in America discuss the end of the petrodollar and the incorrigible national debt? Because, Lisa, if anybody's talked about the national debt in a very serious way, people would get very angry. And the petrodollar, most people don't know what the petrodollar is. James Worth says he's got 2 volumes of The Life and Revelations of Anne Catherine Emmerich by the very Reverend Carl E. Schmonger of CSSR. Nice. I should probably go look that up. Novella. Yeah, if you want to email me about a donation for a book, let me know. Hold that thought though until I do the actual fundraiser, just because until I figure out how to do it, because it would be amazing if we ended up raising $5,000 to buy all the seminarians, the seminarians who make it to priest formation, cassocks for various traditionalist fraternities. That would be great. But I want to make sure that we don't raise a ton of money that I'll find myself on the hook for, and without having taken some care and design. Communism is condemned by the Holy Church, says Thomas Hamilton, not mainly because of redistribution, since that's an effect, not the cause, but mainly because it's militant atheism and anti-Catholic. It's true, and also socialism is condemned by the church because its materialistic worldview is not compatible with Catholicism.
Yeah, and it's so funny because you get the defenders of these ideologies will tell you that they're Catholic and that. Well, the problem is you just don't. We don't agree on the definition of the word definition, or read Wittgenstein, and it's like, dude, you're telling me to read Wittgenstein, and you're telling me you're a Catholic at the same time.
Yeah, here's a revolutionary thinker you should read.
Yeah, right. The French Revolution, that had a lot of great Catholic ideas in it. I mean, it's literally that level of,
That's my favorite.
Stupidity.
That's my new favorite attack on Belloc. People call him a socialist. No, he wasn't. He used to be, and then he converted. And people are like, well, he said nice things about the French Revolution. Yes, before he returned to his faith.
Right, yeah.
Now, if anybody who wandered from the faith had to, be hounded by the stuff they said during that period for the rest of their life, that's not fair. Charlotte Pettit says... Cardinal Zen said that the Pope is leading the sheep to the wolves. This was on World Over on AWTN on Thursday. I wouldn't doubt that he believes that. I wish he'd release more written statements. I'd read them. Yeah, I consider him one of the better bishops. And he's very laser focused on what's going on over there.
Freeze frame talking about the Philippines.
Yeah, they are 90% Catholic, and religious leaders calling out government leaders when they vote against church teachings. Wish you had that in America. I do wish we had that too.
Yeah.
Judgment proof must mean the creditor can't get the debtor to pay the debt back. Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about like recourse on a loan. It sounds like. So yeah, I mean, here's the thing. There's a lot of digital ink spilled on an attempt to kind of allow for certain types of interest on loans due to. I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and this is going to be in that Usury publication on leoinstitute.org sometime here in the near future, I'm hoping. But the thing is there's all this chicanery, I think, around language and the specific Latin words used in Vix Prevenit and all the other, there's a distinction between a loan where you're required to only pay back the so like, let's say for instance, if I borrow money for a house and allegedly, okay, according to this other perspective on usury, allegedly, if certain conditions are met, then paying interest on the loan is okay, is permissible. It's not usury. And one of those conditions is, can the lender come after me personally if I default on the loan, or can they just get the house itself back, right? So like, let's say I owe $100,000 and the house is only worth $80,000.
Levi, I got to interrupt for a second. I got to step away from my computer for a minute, so if you want to just
sure,
take care of this, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so the idea is that if the house is only worth $80,000 and the loan is for $100,000, is the lender allowed to come after me personally for that other $20,000 difference, right? They can obviously take the house back, right? Because the house was always theirs in the first place, because they were loaning the money to me for that. But can they? I guess the term here is judgment, right? Can they get a judgment from the court to say, okay, now you have to go to Levi, and Levi is required by the court to pay you the other $20,000 gap there? And I'm just not really sure that that's relevant. I don't think that that's relevant. I think the key difference, and if you read Father Pesch, Ethics in the National Economy, I think the thing is you get this idea that risk is the main thing, and risk in our current financial system is, we're talking about the risk of the underlying thing, right, involved. And so if we're talking about a business loan, yeah, there's risk for the underlying business itself, right? But the only type of security you're really talking about, the only type of investment you're talking about when you're talking about the person on the outside loaning the money or investing the money into that business, is equity, right? It's only ownership only ownership in the actual business itself, right? Equity, not debt. Debt does not expose you to the same underlying risk of the business. And I explain this, my latest episode is on usury, and I've got a link to another episode on usury. So I have probably about an hour's worth of content at least on my show specifically on usury. I also talked quite a bit about usury in a live stream with Settlers Lament. So if you look for Settlers Lament's channel on YouTube, I did quite a bit of discussion on usury with those guys, and there's a bunch of stuff in the comments. And so check that stuff out. There's probably, I think that stream was 2 hours long, and about 45 minutes of that is probably usury. So I personally don't think that is relevant. I see where that's coming from. It's coming from kind of leaning on some stuff in Aquinas and leaning on some alleged lack of clarity in Vix Prevenit. But the reality is that the very plain definition in the Catechism of usury is the taking of interest on a loan, period, full stop. Now, can we talk about things like inflation as we did earlier? Sure. But the issue is that usury is just the taking of interest on a loan, period.
Right. So I'm back, and you probably could hear me sitting down on my stupid chair here, but
I couldn't.
So, got a new member of the channel. Thank you very much. When I get that notification in the stream, I'll be able to say who it is. But, Hewling, I did want to answer your question. It says, any plans for platform diversification? You've heard good things about Gab. I'm hoping that Gab isn't quite the, World War II German symbols in the user handle at Central still. It was when it first launched, so I haven't been back in like 4 years or whatever it's been. I might start a new one there. I'm very anti-Parler. Parler just is too conveniently endorsed by the establishment conservatives for my taste. Yeah. And I've already heard of people getting banned there, and apparently the head of Twitter has had a conversation with the head of Parler about them adopting a bunch of their similar policies. So yeah, I don't know why anybody would want to be there. Plus, it was actually on your personal Facebook, Levi, that I found all that legal talk there was making the decision. So, but I may check Gab out again. And Gab's been in the fight for a long time. I mean, they developed a way to comment on websites that didn't allow commenting until all the browser companies banned the extension.
Just unreal. It's unreal.
Right. Like this is how we get subversion of a culture, by the way, is that kind of coordination.
Yeah.
Let's see. Somebody's asked me if Triket is worth the is he worth the coin? Check out his YouTube channel. Go back to older videos, because most of his videos now are just, hey, this is what I'm going to talk about on my thing. Come and join. But he has tons of interviews. He is prolific with his interviews. I talk to him about it used to be once a month. Now it's about once every 5 weeks, because he's getting more prolific with his interviews. And he's getting all kinds of people from, our kind of sphere of Catholic commentary to to all sorts of other stuff. Like he's casts a very wide net. And so in terms of the cost, you're getting a lot of content for your money. So beyond that, you would want to go listen to his older content, or to see what he puts up, because he's very edgy compared to me. Like he just doesn't have a filter at all.
Yeah.
But he also has his own paywall website, so he doesn't need to worry about it. Like for them to take him down, they'd have to go after the website itself, which can be done.
Yeah,
has happened.
It's happened.
Let's see. Time to go catch up with you during the week. Okay, have a nice one, Patch. Let's see. I'm way behind now in here. Okay, it's Freeze Frame. Well, welcome Freeze Frame to the channel. Appreciate you very much. What are my thoughts on taxes or tax rate inflation? Taxes are fine. I have issue with what they're used for. And what do you mean by tax rate inflation? I mean, this state of where taxes are just continually going up and up and up?
Right. Well, and I mean, I think, like thinking about your property taxes, typically there's two components to that. There's the valuation of your house, and there's the mill rate, the percentage that they get. I mean, my take on this is some taxes need to be much lower or zero, and other taxes need to be much higher. So I think one theory that's interesting is that property taxes should be much higher, or at least on a second property, so that it discourages the creation of these massive generators of rootlessness called apartments.
Right. Like I wouldn't have a problem with with that kind of policy, as long as we weren't taxing primary homes.
Yeah, of course.
But making it so you prevent basically large businesses from owning all the land. And people go, well, where's the land come from? If you're talking about distributism, because what are we redistributing? In the United States, the federal government owns something like 30% of the land in the country.
But it's mostly land that nobody lives on.
Right.
Yeah.
But
so
let's see here.
Where does inflation come from if there is no usury? I mean, I don't see a real tie between these two concepts. Inflation, if you're talking about price inflation, you're talking about an increase in the consumer price index. That has more to do with too much money chasing too few goods. But then I guess I see the connection, because, usury and, where does our money come from? Well, really our money is, essentially treasuries, right? That's how the money supply is manipulated. is through the buying and selling of treasuries. And I mean, I think this is a good point. Where does inflation? I think you would have inflation even if your currency was not based on debt. So like even if you had a fiat currency that was not based on debt, you would still have, with a certain set of Federal Reserve policies, you would still have you could still have inflation. But you're right, and this is a great point, that I think this person's name is Vox Populus. I don't know. Anyway, you're right that the system we have is just so utterly infected with usury that it is almost impossible for us to visualize what a world would look like without it. Right? And so,
and I think there's a great temptation people have right now of trying to want to establish a Catholic version of what we have now. Catholic Walmart, Catholic Amazon.com.
Right.
And I think we need to think bigger about that. We're talking about preserving and protecting the family, and preserving and protecting the faith, and creating a society that is safe for the faith and safe for families. And we don't have that right now. One of the statistics that I heard that's always chilled me came from Southern Baptists, actually, but they had done some research about what happens in the first year of college that you send your kids to school. Something like 80% of them lose their faith in the first year. And I heard that information from the campus ministers for the campus missionaries for an Argentinian missionary group out of Argentina, but from the first American woman who became a part of the a religious for their not a nun but a consecrated religious, and she wears full habit, like new group, full habit, quasi-charismatic. That's why they drive me nuts, because I've been to their new masses, and they're some of the most reverent new masses I've ever seen, except they're also quasi-charismatic, which is a problem for me. But I got that data from them, and their job is that they do at these universities, the few that they're at, is to try to catch people in that first and second year to prevent them from losing their faith first, and then also talk to students who are interested in the faith. And in a society that was at least somewhat run on Catholic principles, it wouldn't be that big of a problem. I was very heartened when the president came out and said about threatened to remove funding from the higher education institutions unless they stop being propaganda outlets. I love that. I love that. I mean, good luck, but
it's good rhetoric, even if it doesn't have teeth. Yeah,
it's meant to. That's red meat for the base. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So Thomas Keller says people have redefined nominal interest as not the actual cost of doing the paperwork and the like, but as market interest, which is whatever the common rate is up to the legally usurious rate. Yeah, so I think there's two things there. So first of all, that as Catholics, I think Vix Prevent is very clear that the rate of interest, in fact, it's just flat out stated in Vix Prevent that the rate of interest doesn't matter. It's taking of interest itself is what is usury. And yes, you're right. There is a maximum rate that that we call usury laws. Right there's a rate that is allowable up to a certain point. And I think that's an interesting thing, Thomas, because I think if you look at Lateran 5, where we're creating these institutions, and I can't remember the name, but we're creating these institutions that essentially are providing loans to people so that they don't have to rest on the usurers. And the thing about these institutions is the only thing they're charging you, they're not charging you interest, they're charging you just a fee to do the paperwork. And so, but I think the problem is that, there's a lot of theory we have to get through and we have to kind of knock down from a philosophical standpoint, because we have opportunity cost, we have this idea of default risk, and all these reasons, allegedly, that we are supposed to be paying interest beyond just like what you're saying, which is just paying the interest or just doing the paperwork.
So just to interrupt here for a second, Peter says, read Louis Even, early 20th century, from his writing Michael Fighting. Well, there's a website dedicated to his work. I've never even heard about him, but I put it in the chat in case anybody wants to check it out. I'll try it. I left it open. Yeah. When I turned in this draft of my dissertation, I closed all my dissertation-related tabs, and it dropped it from an obscene number to something manageable, and that's already starting to creep back up again.
So CF Healing says, seems as if money today should be backed by precious metals. I mean, to me, that's the simplest way to put a check on, the proliferation of, inflation. But
then we can't get any more $1,200 stimulus checks.
Yeah, right. So it does significantly curtail the anti-reality political stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think the world was a better place when we had precious metals for currency because, and again, like you're saying, so then you can't. Well, this fits in with what we were just saying about doing the paperwork for a loan, right? This whole idea that, well, I have to service the debt, right? I have to be able to pay people for deposits at my bank so that then I can take those deposits and lend them out, right? So that in itself is a usurious kind of situation, or at least it creates this floor, right? So if you didn't have that problem, if you didn't have to pay a rate for deposits, then you wouldn't have just modern banking is just so messed up and so weird and crazy that I agree with you, CF Hewling. I mean, but the other thing is that the other way to get around this is to just stop the boomer project of slicing every family off as soon as you're 18 years old, right? As soon as you're 18 years old, you're supposed to just leave your parents and be financially independent from them, right? Well, like never in the history of humanity we were like this, right? So we got to stop putting these weird, I think, cultural taboos on people who rely on their parents or who rely for help on people, because that's the only way. I mean, you're either going to have them relying on banks and usury, or you're going to have them relying on their family. Well, sorry, but I'm going to go with family on that one.
Let's see. Let's see where I lost it here, but Archbishop Gomez has yet to make a clear statement on what is happening to Catholics in California. His deputy, I'm thinking you mean California, his deputy seems more focused on attacking Vigano. Yeah, no, there's a reason I put my Catholic journalism essay up today. Let's just say. Like at the intro to my Belloc one. If you haven't listened to that, go and listen to it. It's short. I'm pretty sure if I don't do it in the video, I did it on every social media site I shared it on where it was like, if you're not aware of this, Levi, but CNA had anonymous sources from the White House saying that the quote-unquote real Catholics working in the White House are dismayed at the president sharing Vigano and references to Dr. Marshall, and it makes it hard to get their work done. And it's like, anonymous sources, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not fans of anonymous sources, especially from the White House. They tend to be cancer. That's just me, though.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's a lot of talk about the FDIC. The standard deposit insurance coverage limit is $250,000 per depositor per FDIC insured bank owner per ownership category. Deposits held in different ownership categories are separately insured, up to at least $250,000 even if held at the same bank. Anything above $250,000 and then is false. I've always wondered how the super rich, keep their money safe, because they can't be putting it all into land and all of it into the stock market. So there's got to be other things they do, and I'm guessing that
just multiple accounts, yeah,
at different banks, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would guess that a lot of the banks in my area, there's a lot of family run banks with 2 and 5 locations. I have 2 bank accounts. I opened one when I first moved out here, and it's got 5 locations. I could go yell at the president of the bank by driving half an hour to a small town where his office is, and I love that. By the way, I eventually want to move all my main banking over there, but I've noticed that Google and some other things prefer the national bank that I use. Obvious reasons, I think. But,
of course.
I would bet that all these small town banks have lots of $1 million, multimillionaires depositing money there.
Yeah.
Do I think that democratic socialists are trying to implement the Saudi model of banking, where the citizens don't work, get UBI, and contract out foreign workers? I would not be shocked at all if that's what they wanted. I mean, the fact that they all jumped on Andrew Yang's UBI thing makes me almost wonder if he was, planted into their primary as an outsider with no shot who could get the conversation started. I'm not a fan of UBI. I'm not a fan of anything that actually incentivizes people not to do something productive.
Yeah.
Aren't the SSPX bishops getting to the age Lefebvre was in 88? What's going to happen when the time comes to the next generation? From what I hear, they've got some kind of idea of what to do. I don't know the details. When they make some sort of announcement or take some sort of concrete action, assuming I haven't been, nuked off the internet, I'll plan to cover it for you guys. Thomas Hamilton needs to go bop off. Yes, enjoy the rest of your Lord's Day. If anyone is looking for the Tradcath Industrialists to take over the world, let me know. I am game to squish Wally World and Amazon. Good to know, Yavo. I'll be cutting it here in a minute anyway. So, Star Trek: The Next Generation Voyages of the SSPX. There was an amazing Twitter thread I found once. I don't remember who wrote it, and I wish I'd bookmarked it, but it had like single tweets under the old 144 character format that were just little snippets of a story set in the future where the entire world was Catholic, basically, and there was a papal space imperium, and it was amazing. They were very entertaining tweets to read, and I wish I'd saved it. And the Pope in that era was extremely based. Let's see. What does your guest think about anime? Does he have a favorite anime show? Oh, KMO is in the chat now.
Anime. The only anime I'm really familiar with is stuff from the 80s when I was a little kid, like really little, and like watching reruns of it as a child later. So like the Thundercats, right? Yeah. I like that one. That's anime, right? Because it's a Japanese cartoon.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure old school Transformers is technically anime too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I watched those too. I'm not as quite as experienced in the world as Anthony is.
There you go.
He has a little more experience in life than I do.
The only anime that I remember liking as an adult was what was that one? I can't remember the name of it now. I'm tired. It's the one that takes place on a desert planet with the name Oregon in it or something. And then I liked Ninja Scroll. But again, I haven't seen this stuff in 10 years. Like, and those stuff are like that one's it was pretty hardcore anime, not like hardcore like gross, but like it's about ninjas doing ninja things, right? So yeah.
Oh wait, what's the other one? There's the other one with the lions, and they all form the one big guy. And there's like the princess, Oh man,
I don't know. I'm assuming you're not talking about Power Rangers, which is not an anime, but
no, it's not that. It was something way before.
They're talking about rebooting Power Rangers and having it be like getting the Ghostbusters 2016 treatment.
I would entertain some suggestions for animes. The problem is I can't get my wife to watch them. That's my only problem. She won't watch them.
My wife is out there watching a John Wayne movie right now, to give you an idea of what my wife is doing.
That's cool.
Yeah, so Brian O'Connor is fractional reserve banking against Catholic social teaching vis-a-vis usury.
Oh, man, that's a hard question.
Isn't that where they just sort of, like, money kind of gets invented out of thin air, though?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that the standard story on fractional reserve banking is possibly dubious. And here's the thing is I'm not an expert on banking, right? Like banking is incredibly complex from an economic standpoint.
So Rebecca says, don't watch Ninja Scroll. I barely remember it. I just remember being extremely violent. So anything I say, I watched this before as a Catholic, is not an endorsement necessarily.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And if anybody here thinks that I was talking about transferring money to an offshore bank, no. I'm talking about transferring money from a national bank to a local community bank.
I just remembered is Voltron. That's the other anime that I watched when I was a kid.
I missed the boat on Voltron. When I was a kid, I was watching mostly like The Muppet Show, which was a little advanced for what I was watching it, and like G.I. Joe and He-Man and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So as far as fractional reserve banking being usurious in and of itself,
Speed Racer is cringe. Thomas Keller has declared it. I would agree.
Speed Racer. Yeah, that was another one.
Is Voltron the cat robot? Yes, Voltron is the cat robot.
Voltron's the cat robot. That's right. Yeah. And I even watched the newer one. I think it was on Netflix or something. And I mean, it was a little bit, bad because it's new, but I thought it was kind of cool. So as far as fractional reserve banking, my goodness. I mean, fractional reserve banking is basically dependent on loans, right? I mean, the other way it's like, how do you avoid usury period in a fractional reserve system? I don't know if you can, but I think what the point is here is that we have to start by pointing out that usury is evil, right? And pointing out the way why it's bad, how it negatively affects people, and start trying to come up with ways to alleviate its negative effects, right? So treat the symptoms. And then then at some point, right, then you get to the point where you're trying to attack the actual institutions. And by attack, I mean change, not attack physically, but change the institutions that the whole thing rests on. And so, is fractional reserve banking inherently usurious? Maybe. It depends on, but in the name, right, reserve, you're referring to a system of lending. So, yeah, probably. It probably is inherently usurious. But is that part of it the worst part? No. Is that the part you ought to try to change first? No. There are other things that you need to deal with before you deal with the sort of the fundamentals of the system, I think.
Alpi says that I'm super intellectual watching the Advanced Muppet Show, where Kermit talks about its effects on the economy and social welfare. Well, I think I was watching it when I was 8, and if you ever watched the Muppet Show, you watch it when you're 8, you're going to miss a lot of jokes. Like that, the best kid-friendly content out there, I think, is the stuff where the kids are not going to get the jokes the adults will, and there's no threat to the children's morality either. That's the key, is that last part, though, because sometimes kids these days, but let's see. But yeah, Paul Perla, I did take him. I bookmarked that on a watch later to check it out later. My wife and I rented the new Midway movie. I really liked that. We also checked out what was the one we watched yesterday? Murder on the Orient Express. Surprisingly good movie. I was actually surprised how good that movie was. It's like old school, like Hollywood knows how to make a good movie. And I was actually shocked when I saw that the woman who plays Rey in the new Star Wars movies was in it and was actually good. I was like, because like I have come to hate everything about the new Disney Star Wars stuff. So. Thinking of an alternate universe now where I never became a Catholic and one of those angry nerds yelling about Star Wars. Thank God that didn't happen. But no, those movies were really good. But I put Somewhere in Time on my watch later list. Although when I put it into Amazon for Prime, I made sure to put Christopher Reeve in there so it wouldn't give me Iron Maiden's album by the same name, because I'm an old school metalhead who knows these things. Let's see. Levi is gone completely silent. You still there, Levi? Let's see. What about St. Gregory Radio? I have never heard of St. Gregory Radio. Let me see. Oh, he got dropped out of Discord. That's why. Let's see. Usury destroys lives. It does. I haven't seen 1917 novella. It was between that and Midway, and I didn't want to. Am
I on now?
You're back. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we were talking. Went from cashless societies to movie recommendations. So.
Yeah, I could hear you. I could hear you talking. That's why I couldn't figure out why I was allegedly dropped out.
Someone said that Rainbow Love is promoted in the last Star Wars movie, so you prohibit yourself from watching it. There is apparently, I haven't seen episode 9 because I will probably stream it someday. I'll probably rent it. I have access to Disney Plus. I'll probably watch it for free. But I will say that they do show 2 females kissing in the background. Yay, thank you, Disney, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Midway movie was really good, accurate about how the Japanese were dependent of doctrine and couldn't caused their defeat. Thank God. Yeah, no, that movie was very good, and it did the usual modern Hollywood, hey, we want to make the Chinese look good so we could sell our movie there. But at least in this time, it was historically accurate to do so and wasn't pandering. Like, I don't know, Levi, are you aware that after Pearl Harbor, we sent some army bombers to carpet bomb Tokyo, and they didn't have enough fuel to get back, so they just kept flying and land, and like all the guys had to parachute out of the bombers into China, which was occupied by the Japanese. Yeah.
Whoa. No thanks.
Yeah. Hard pass, right? And the movie's got a good cast of people, so definitely recommended. I do recommend Murder on the Orient Express as well, because it's just really good, and it's not historically accurate about anything as far as I can tell, and it's not super woke either, which is appreciated. Pablo says, once one of the major currencies collapses, most of the world will be looking to the U.S. dollar and flooding into that. That will be a bad move. It will be a domino effect with the other fiat. Get ahead by knowing where they're going by what they're saying, they're moving to digital currency. Right, and it depends on the delivery system of the digital currency is one of the things that I will be worried about. The root of everything is a privatized central banking system. Yeah, this is why I think of Woodrow Wilson as probably the most destructive president in the history of the United States. Between that and the League of Nations, and what the reason what history tells us as the bad guys of World War II tell their reasoning for everything they did was because of Woodrow Wilson and the peace after the war. Like Woodrow Wilson was like, and he's a shame to my profession too. Like I'm a political scientist, and he was the only guy with a PhD in political science to have ever become president. Give you an idea. Yeah,
that's a nightmare.
Does anyone know what caused the cash and/or change shortage? You keep it up and you're clueless. I'm guessing the mints are closed right now. That's part of it.
I think that may be part of it, but I think what's happening is like because people can't go into places to pay for stuff, the cash and coins are like pooling up in certain places, and it's not getting circulated enough.
That's probably part of it. Like I'm looking on my bookshelf right now, and I've got a large jar that has got a fair amount of coins in it. And I'm debating whether to take it all to the bank or to my local bank or not. Or if I should just hang on to it. Elpis, Disney is demonic, but sure, Disney Plus is okay. No, I'm not saying that at all. I said I have access to Disney Plus. If I want to go watch the new terrible Star Wars movie, that's where I would do it, so I don't have to pay money for it. Some say to transfer to crypto. I'm not a fan of crypto. John Kenny, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. I'm guessing that's a movie about that. Disney Plus has a few good classics. The rest is trash. Yeah, that's probably true. Let's see. They were supposed to make it to the nationalist Chinese airfields, but in most cases they ran out of gas short. It's amazing that most of the pilots and the crew members of those bombers survived and managed to regroup. But the price the Chinese paid for their arrival was staggering. And the movie goes all into it. The Pacific series was good, as was Das Boot. The American Volunteers Flying Tigers would be a good movie. That was Doolittle's raid that is shown in the Midway movie. Oh, nice. Yeah, that would be. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, can we be done with World War II movies for a while? Rebecca says, Ireland protests the normalization of... You see, that's why I did approve your comment, because you're using the P word. In their education system, over-sexualizing their kids. Look up the Magenta Diaries. It's a book for primary kids. I'll pass. I'll take your word for it. I try not to get angry these days. Thomas Keller Doolittle raid was the carpet bombing of Japan with the parachuting into China. Yeah, and that's actually probably one of my favorite parts in the movie, besides the end. The end of Midway is absolutely epic. Wilson set the stage for FDR policies in the 30s. Right. Well, in political science, there's this thing called realignment theory, and a video I've been wanting to make since day one has been like the theory about cycles of history. You hear a lot of people talk about this stuff. And political science,
the fourth turning or whatever.
Yeah, turning theory. Well, political science has this too. And one of the more prevalent theories is that you get these realigning presidents who show up, and they usually have a precursor who is generally not widely well remembered, but the realigning president comes like 10 years later or so and is in every way just like that person who's not well remembered, but just more effective at what they're doing. And they show up at the right time. And so FDR, shows up and gets elected in 32. And and when was Wilson president? And he was president through the war, right? Well, FDR literally did do everything that Wilson did, and then some. And he did a lot of things that Wilson wanted to do but couldn't do. People defend the World War I president for not being for the German treaty, but what he did to Austria-Hungary is infinitely worse for the world and would have caused problems. Right, like, well, if he hadn't have done what he had done to Austria-Hungary, we may not have had that second war. That German guy might have just gone on to be a failed painter. Maybe he would have rotted in prison somewhere. Better world in general, probably. What about G-force? I'm not sure what G-force is. Do Catholics believe in a computer chip to buy and sell as mark of the beast? The church has never formally said anything about that. People have theories. That's all you can do with the mark of the beast is have theories. Because it seems to be that there will be a system of the beast. The Bible is pretty clear that the Antichrist will control all selling, all commerce. How do you do that without some sort of system? It stands to reason, but I don't know. I remember when people thought it was a computer, like a barcode. So... The way to create one world government is to first enslave every nation into debt. Well, that's one way to do it, I guess. But you wouldn't necessarily need to have an overt government to do that. Just people with an interest of keeping everybody in debt.
Yep.
Will we become a hypochondriac society even after the thing is over and handled. I think we're already there.
Yeah.
We're already there. There was a woman who got arrested because a guy left a Costco and took his mask off, like as he was walking out the door, and she was arrested because she spit in his face for taking the mask off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I saw that on my Twitter timeline. I was like, lovely.
Oh man.
A couple of places weren't taking cash last week. They said they didn't have cash coins for making change. Some conspiracy theorists say it's set up a cashless society. I mean, it could. I don't know. Like, my only concern about like most of these theories is that would require the government, and I'm not a believer that the U.S. government is all that competent. And that's not a dig at the guy running the government. I almost bet if I could have a private conversation with him over Diet Coke, because he famously doesn't drink, I would manage to get him to be like, yeah, I've never been around so many incompetent people in my life. I bet that would be he would have that opinion.
Yeah.
Let's see, a lot of people talking about World War I here and the aftermath. Novella Nerny says Gran Torino is a good YouTube site for Irish Catholic political content. There's a YouTube channel called Gran Torino, not to be confused with the Clint Eastwood movie by the same name,
or the Ford product,
which is what the movie's named after.
Yeah,
and plays a central role in that movie. That movie has got some delightfully colorful language for people who can handle that kind of thing. But if you can't handle extremely un-PC stuff, don't watch that movie.
Yeah.
Doolittle Raid, covered by a good wartime movie, is 40 Seconds Over Tokyo with Spencer Tracy from 1944. Pretty accurate. Raid was the reason Japan moved on to Guadalcanal, one of the pivotal World War II battles. The next Obama realignment will be, I don't know. I'm looking to see how things go with this presidency, because my theory is, and I've got this, I'm not the only one thinking this, that if like the president doesn't get reelected, his successor will probably be somebody horrific. Like, they will be horrific, and that will probably get you're going to get a realigning. You'll get that realigning figure after him, and it'll be one of those turning presidencies. I think it was Charles Colomb was talking about how he almost can see in our future a Franco or Mr. Mustache if things keep going the way they're going. Do you think about how bad it would have to get?
Yeah, it would have to get really bad.
But I mean, we're on our way, right? Like you've got politicians endorsing, the crazy things in the streets right now. Rebecca Phillips was mentioning that book again. I don't remember the title of it, but if anyone in California or Florida sees that book in their kids' homework pile, best to be aware is all that they're saying. No, that's good advice. The bombing of Dresden was horrific, but such is war. Well, I mean, it also violates what the Church's standards of just war is. You can't do indiscriminate things. Census Fidelium has a great talk about how the Church was against the use of the atom bomb for that reason. Because it's just indiscriminate. Plus, the atom bomb was deployed by a president who was a member of the Stonecutters, targeting the two Catholic places in Japan. Just saying. A little fishy. 1913, 1921 was Wilson's terms, yeah. Then you had Coolidge and Hoover, yeah. Even if Germany was perfect, the Eastern and balloon situation would have caused the war anyway. H-Man would have just taken over power when the situation reaches Germany or in chaos. Maybe. He was a guy who showed up at a specific point in history. Could have been one of the people close to him, which would have probably been worse, actually. Keep Litter St. Peter says, our enemy prowls around like a lion seeking the ruin of souls. This is absolutely true. This is why we always say to be wise in how you speak about things. Way late on the VP announcements. We are. They are. That's one of the things that's really kind of weird right now, is that Biden hasn't named his VP yet. I'm kind of wondering why that is. Look what happened to our Lord when he whipped the moneylenders out of the temple. Yeah, that's true. Forget Harding. He was a very short term. Yeah, well, he didn't last very long. G-Force was an anime series with teenagers dressing up like birds. Oh, okay, that's why I never saw it, because I don't do anime. MacArthur could have become one of those Mr. Mustache people. Maybe. I can't see MacArthur, maybe, but freeze frame. Michael Obama will run in 2024. Well, freeze frame.
Oh, dear.
But that's... that's a horrifying thought. Do you think we are heading towards Spanish Civil War 2.0? It depends on how things go in November.
Yeah.
You had the strangest high mass today. You had to serve both acolytes. Weird. Let's see. They named the VP at the convention. Brian Connor says, well, yeah, but usually by now the nominees already said, here, this is going to be my VP, and then the convention is just for show. That's all it is. Very little is done there, except some of the policy stuff is done. Wilson hated Catholics. In 1916-17, Benedict XV proposed peace with Germany, Austria-Hungary agreed. Wilson joined with England and France, both anti-Catholic, in rejecting it. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Alternative history is fun, and then it's not very productive. This is true. All right, I think we've gone long enough, though. 2.5 hours is pretty good. So, again, Levi, why don't you tell people who you are, where you can be found here on YouTube and elsewhere, and then we'll call it a good day at that point.
Yeah, so I host the Catholic Economics podcast. You can find that on Anchor.fm or any podcast app. I have a YouTube channel as well. And due to the affliction, as Anthony calls it, my employer has been hit relatively hard. So I also have come up with a Subscribe Star and a Patreon that's linked on my YouTube channel. So and also interact with me on Twitter at Catholic Econ. I'm always posting stuff. I'm always a lot of times I try to do threads on topics that I'm going to be covering in episodes. So
yep. So and I put a link in the chat somewhere. Let me see if your show is still up. It is. I'll just do a copy to your latest episode in the chat again.
Great, thanks.
Boom, there it is. Kimberly Tancredi, who has Biden picked for VP? No one yet, which is weird because it's late. And don't need to apologize, freeze frame. Whenever that person's name comes up, I always have to call them by the internet joke, which I really hope is just a joke. Otherwise, we're in a little serious trouble. Pablo, implements are selling out again leading up to this election. Just saying, majority of Americans aren't dumb. They know what they're trying. Right, there are a lot of indicators going on that the only way that the other side's going to win is if they cheat spectacularly, and that happens to be one of them. People don't typically go and stock up on that stuff and they go vote for the party of Moloch. I mean, come on. Freestream says the VP will be a heavy internationalist. The VP is going to be who you're voting for president if you're voting for the people who are going to vote for them. And